going to call to order the regular meeting of the Solvang City Council for January 19th, 2017. Will you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Deuce.
Present.
Jameson. Here. Toussaint. Present. Zimmerman.
Here.
Mayor Richardson.
Here. Will you stand with me with the Pledge of Allegiance, please? Place your hand over your heart. Repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. City Manager's report.
Just one quick thing, and that's, as I do regularly, is report anniversaries of our employees. Maricela Flores in our finance department celebrated 15 years this month as a city employee. So
It's a good sign.
just a quick short report.
Thank you. Right now, we're going to the Brown Act training presentation, but we're also following that, we're going to go through our ethics training that we had put on the end of the agenda. So we'll do the Brown Act training first. I want a little introduction. The Brown Act is what we as a council and as electeds must follow to keep a transparent actions of ourselves. And we have to do this about every year or so. We have to have this training. And it's a good opportunity for you folks out there to see how slowly sometimes the mills of government work. And one of the reasons of it is because of the Brown Act and the fact that we can't caucus as a council without certain rights and privileges. So please, David.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Just an introduction for those of the public who don't know me. I'm the assistant city attorney. I'm a different face than they may be used to seeing. I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. It's this presentation can expand in terms of time, but we have some other matters that we're going to need to get to. So I'll go through this fairly quickly, and if there are questions along the way, feel free to chime in. I'm going to be going through some essential concepts for local government officials in this presentation. Three of the issues that I'll be covering tonight are the Brown Act, the Political Reform Act, and conflicts of interest in due process in public hearings. The reason that we do this for public officials is fourfold, basically for effective governance, confidence by members of the public in the public process, to avoid criminal and civil penalties, and probably the most important for you as council members is to avoid having your decisions set aside on technical reasons. So the three essential points that I'd like you to take away from this presentation tonight are serial meetings, the 500-foot rule, and I have the ish in quotations. I'll explain that in a little bit, and be fair in public hearings. Notice the quotes there. Two basic concepts under the Brown Act: that the people's business should be conducted openly, and several minds are better than one. The Brown Act is named after Ralph M. Brown, who was a legislator back in the 50s and 60s, and the preface to the Brown Act is that the people of the state do not yield their sovereignty to the agencies that serve them. So the Brown Act is an opportunity for public oversight of the elected officials in the governing process. And you can read the rest of it there, but the people insist on remaining informed so that they may retain control over the instruments that they've created: city councils, planning commissions, and so on. So, who's subject to the Brown Act? The City Council, obviously, the Planning Commission, other commissions, such as the BAR. There are some private corporations that are subject to the Brown Act, whether voluntarily or because they receive public funding, and successful candidates and nominees. So there's a lag time between an election and a council member actually being sworn in. They're covered by the Brown Act during that period of time. Purposes of the Brown Act. Excuse me. It's public access to decision-making process. We publicly notice the meeting so that the public can attend and provide input. It's also public oversight of the decision-making process. Even if members of the public don't get up and speak, they are allowed to watch, and that's part of the Brown Act. It's also to protect legitimate privacy concerns of public agencies. Sometimes cities are thought of as public agencies, but they're also corporations, and they do have legitimate privacy interests. And we'll get into the closed session issues in just a moment. So what is a meeting? It's a majority of the members of the body, the City Council or the Planning Commission, where they're present at the same time and place to hear, discuss, or deliberate items of discussion within the subject matter jurisdiction of the body. That's a lot of words. You can break it down fairly quickly, but the majority of the members is the important part. If you've got 3 or more members of the City Council, Planning Commission, or other subordinate bodies in the same place and time to discuss something that's within the jurisdiction of that body, then you have a Brown Act issue, and it becomes a meeting. I'll get into the serial meeting and explain that a little bit. A serial meeting is one of the key concepts that I wanted you to be aware of, which is consecutive or serial communications, which even though they may involve less than a quorum of the particular agency, when you take them as a whole, either directly or indirectly, it establishes a collective concurrence or consensus on action to be taken. So the way I kind of diagram this, there are two ways to look at it. You have a daisy chain from 1 to 2 to 3, or you have a hub and spoke where you have one person in the middle who's conveying information to a majority of the council member. And that doesn't have to be a council member, it can be a staff member. So a staff member shouldn't serve as an intermediary conveying information among council members in an attempt to obtain a decision, basically, outside the meeting context. So,
Dave, can I
yes.
ask you a question on that? That's information, it's not decision information, it's just a policy or an item of discussion? Can it be that somebody talks about a particular event?
Well, it depends on the nature of the discussion. Frequently, staff will provide one-way communication to the council about projects that are going on, events within the community, and so on. But if, for example, I, as the city attorney, spoke with you, the mayor, and then 2 other council members and said, well, the mayor is planning to vote this way. What do you 2 other council members think about that? And trying to have a meeting outside the meeting context. That's the problem with the hub and spokes provision up there. So that would be something that would be prohibited. If, by contrast, I say, hey, Mr. Mayor, who do you think should win the Super Bowl this year? And 2 other council members have told me that this is their pick for the Super Bowl. That's not something within the city council's jurisdiction. Perfectly acceptable to talk about that.
Thank you.
I want to also differentiate between individual contacts. A member of the council can contact an individual, including a member of the city council, without there being an illegal meeting. But you notice the little diagram there. When 1 speaks to 2 and 2 speaks to 3, then you have a majority of the council speaking on an issue. So that's where the problem comes in. One of the things that we've found more and more frequently is the use of social media to convey issues. And I brought this one up because it pushes the boundaries for this Lemoore City Council member to put on his Twitter feed that the AMC Theater wants to serve beer and wine at its theater. Is it a good idea or not? It's a typo there. And if 2 other council members chime in on that, they've had a meeting, even though they're not in the same place at the same time. They've got a majority of them using intermediaries technologically to come to a collective decision on what should be done at that particular location. And when you have long descriptions of what the council members' views are, as you see in the Facebook post up there, that can also be a problem because the other council members may want to chime in on that as part of the comments. So that can be a problem. I'm not sure why the laptop's doing that, but I'm going to try to push through it. So how do you prevent this? Well, you avoid discussing city business with more than 1 other board member outside a public meeting. If you do it in the public meeting and it's noticed, that's perfectly fine. That's why we have these meetings. And you can also avoid soliciting or communicating the views of other board members outside the public meeting. So what's not a meeting subject to the Brown Act? The individual communications that I talked about, whether it's a member of the public or a council member, just 2 of them, that's fine. If you go to conferences like the League of California Cities, Mayor and Council Members Institute, as long as you are communicating with each other as part of that program, that's fine. If you're sitting in the back of the room discussing city business that's not part of that conference, that can be a problem. Community meetings like Neighborhood Watch, that's fair game as well. Same rule applies, though, that it should be limited to participation in the program itself rather than discussing city business unrelated to the community meeting. Another body of the agency, if the council wanted to attend a planning commission meeting, that's permissible. Again, same rule applies, though. The communications have to be as part of the meeting and not unrelated to the meeting. And I'm Windows impaired, I apologize. I have no idea why that keeps jumping up. And social or ceremonial events, those are also, the same rule applies. Just make sure that you avoid discussing city business other than as part of the event. So the meeting notice requirements that we have, fairly straightforward. It has to, on the agenda, show the time, place, and a brief general description of the action to be discussed, not action to be taken. I've had some members of the public in the past say that if the agenda doesn't outline all the potential actions that the council can take, then the agenda is defective. That's not what the Brown Act says. It just says the items to be discussed. There are different agenda timing requirements for the different kinds of meetings. I'm not going to get into that too much, but special meetings have a shorter timeline than regular meetings. They do have to be posted in a freely accessible location, and this is the primary point of the Brown Act, is that no item or action or discussion on a subject not described in the agenda can be discussed. There's some limited exceptions where you can add things to the agenda if necessary. Public participation. Members of the public have to be given an opportunity to address the City Council on any item within the subject matter jurisdiction, whether or not on the agenda, at a regular meeting in any event. Special meetings, the comments limited to items on the agenda. We have the general public comment opportunity for the members of the public for that. Closed session, I'm not going to discuss too much about that, but if there's not a specific type of closed session authorized by the Brown Act, the session must be open to the public. And the closed sessions are really only applicable to the City Council. They don't apply to Planning Commission or BAR. The remedies for the Brown Act, there are criminal violations. It's a misdemeanor. Specific intent has to be shown. I haven't seen too many Brown Act prosecutions outside of Los Angeles County. The district attorney down there is fairly active in prosecuting Brown Act violations, but the civil penalties are really more of interest to smaller communities in that the decisions can be reversed if they're in violation of the Brown Act, and the successful plaintiff can get costs and attorney's fees, and that can add up very quickly. So that's all I have for the Brown Act, very briefly. I know I'm running through this very quickly, but if you have comments or questions about the Brown Act, I'm happy to answer those at this point before we move into the conflicts of interest.
Are there any questions from the council about the Brown Act presentation?
Okay. We'll go into the conflict of interest a little bit. There are three basic sources of law on the conflicts of interest. You've got the Political Reform Act, which is statutory. You've got common law rules, which are bias or prejudice, and I'll get into that a little bit more. And then you've got Government Code Section 1090, which is a specific type of conflict involving contracts. Basically, though, the purpose for having these laws on conflicts is to ensure that the city's decisions are based solely on what best serves the public interest in eliminating bias and prejudice from the public decision-making process. So the important thing to remember about conflicts, it doesn't mean the public official has done anything wrong. It just means the official shouldn't participate in making a decision. I say sometimes that in smaller communities like Solvang, if a council member or planning commissioner doesn't have a conflict from time to time, it's a little unusual because it means they don't own property within the community, or they don't have some type of financial or proprietary interest in the city. It's not to say that that always is the case, but these conflicts come up all the time, and it doesn't mean the council member has done anything wrong. The Political Reform Act does prohibit public officials from making, participating, or influencing a decision in which they have reason to know they have a financial interest. Making and participating is easy. If you're making a decision or participating in the making of a decision where you have a financial interest, that's going to be a problem under the Political Reform Act. The influencing one's a little less intuitive, and we'll get into it a little bit when I talk about what council members have to do when there's a conflict of interest. The basic rule is you have to step down from the decision, of course, but when you're stepping down from the decision, there are other ways that the council member or board member can influence a decision that are not necessarily part of actually participating. They can be behind the scenes, they can be before the council meeting, and so on, even if a council member knows he or she has a conflict of interest. So that influencing a decision is important to keep in mind, even if you're not actually at the meeting. General reminder, the Form 700, you probably have all done one of these fairly recently, or if you haven't, they're due by April 1st. The FPPC has now done an online filing, so that's new this year. It's going to hopefully reduce the amount of paperwork that the city clerk's office has to deal with, but it'll be a little bit easier to file those. Failure to file the Form 700 can result in criminal and civil penalties. You want to try to avoid those. Failure to file it could invalidate an action. If you don't disclose something on your Form 700 and it later comes up in one of the council's decisions, it could invalidate the action. And ultimately, it's the council member's responsibility to make sure that this form gets filed. Lisa would be really good about making sure that the council gets them in on time, but ultimately it's your responsibility. The filing obligations, and talk about the assuming office statement, the annual statement, and the leaving office statement. The annual statements are the ones that are coming up on April 1st. If you have questions about the interest that you're required to report, check with the city clerk's office. There's also ethics training required under AB 1234. This is not that ethics training. I'm just letting you know this is a very quick requirement for the Brown Act, but the ethics training is a little bit more involved, and it can be done online through either the League of California Cities or the Institute for Local Self-Government. So this I pulled out of the FPPC's enforcement bulletin. You can take a look, and these are all people that failed to file their annual reports. And you can see the fines that the FPPC imposes. They're not huge fines, but you can see that they are very, very detailed about going in and making sure that everyone gets their forms filed. So you don't want to be the subject of those fines. How do you know if you have a conflict? It used to be that the FPPC had a fairly detailed test, but if you use this practical test, if it's reasonably foreseeable that your decision will have a material financial effect on you, your spouse, dependent children, or your business that's different from the public generally, then you should listen to your gut and get further guidance on it. This is the actual FPPC four-step analysis that they will go through in analyzing whether or not you have a conflict of interest. It used to be an 8-step test. They've simplified it in the last year and a half or two. It's basically the same test it's always been. So you take a look and see, will the decision result in a reasonably foreseeable financial effect? Are they material effects? Is there something different from the public generally, or is it the same? Will the decision cause those effects? The 500-foot rule is the easiest one to apply. If you've got property within 500 feet of a proposed project or decision, then you should assume that you've got a conflict. There are ways to get around this assumption, but you do need formal advice from the FPPC. Even if the property's outside the 500-foot, if you believe that as a reasonably prudent person there's going to be a financial impact on you, you might want to get further guidance from the FPPC. Up until about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, it was a bright line rule. It was 500 feet. You didn't have to worry outside 500 feet. The FPPC made it less clear, in my opinion, when they made the modifications. But it is something to keep in mind. If you're 503 feet away from a project site, you should at least take a look at it. It's not a crystal clear decision anymore. Conflict checklist. What you should do when you have a conflict is you should identify the type of conflict, whether it's your real property, income, or business, and you're supposed to step down from that item. And again, you have a constitutional right to speak on the item as a member of the public. You can get up and speak at the podium, but it does have to concern your personal financial interests. So I'm not sure many of you have seen a real $5,000 bill. They actually have them, but that's the maximum penalty that FPPC can impose. They don't use the $5,000 bill anymore, but not a bad piece of currency. What do you do if you have conflict questions? You can call the FPPC. They'll provide you informal advice, and they also have an advice line. Because of budget cuts, their hours for providing informal advice are very short. I would not rely on that if it's a particularly important decision. It's also not going to provide you any insulation against a charge from the FPPC. One of the examples that I use is from one of the other cities that I work with. The council members followed the informal advice given by the FPPC, voted on a matter, and then FPPC came around and said, well, you shouldn't have voted on that, and they sanctioned them. They reduced the amount of fine, stating that, well, you followed our informal advice, but you shouldn't have done that anyway. You can also obtain general advice from our office. Again, that doesn't provide you any insulation. You can also provide advice from your own lawyer. Again, provides no insulation unless you have a formal advice letter from FPPC. Government Code Section 1090, I talked about a little bit. It basically prevents you from making a contract in which you have a financial interest. This is now enforced by the FPPC. That's a recent change, and you can also obtain advice from the FPPC as to whether or not you've got a prohibited contract interest. It's basically the same reasons. You don't want to be making decisions in your role as council members that affect your personal financial interest. So if you were going to, as a council member, vote on a contract with your company, you would receive a material financial interest from the city. That would be prohibited under Section 1090. There's also the common law conflicts of interest. It's the type of thing that I can't really give you a bright line test for it, but it's a gut feeling. If you think there's a problem with a decision, you should at least explore that feeling. your brother came in and said, I've got a project, I'd really like your support on this, and you didn't feel comfortable about voting on your brother's project because you spend a lot of time with your brother, that's the kind of common law conflict of interest that you might want to explore. It's not necessarily legally prohibited, but it may have a tendency for the public to think that you are not being an impartial decision maker. And so I talk about the be fair in the quotes. That's what I'm getting at when I say things like that. When you're sitting as judges or a quasi-adjudicative type of hearing, appeal hearings and so on, variances, CUPs, where you're weighing evidence and listening to presentations where you have to exercise discretion in applying the city code to a particular set of facts, you want to be fair about it. You want to act as a judge and insulate yourself from the types of things that might tend to impair your decision-making's legitimacy. So when you receive evidence outside the public hearing format, that can deny the parties to that hearing a fair opportunity to rebut that. So I always suggest that if you have ex parte or other communications outside the hearing format, that you disclose those. AB 1234, I mentioned that a little bit. This is not that training. If you have not done that training within the last year and a half, you should look into getting that done because it has to be done every 2 years. And that's the end of my slideshow at this point. Happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions of the presentation? For most of us, this is old hat, but it's a good refresher. Excuse me. We were going to go to agenda item number 9 next, which is our ethics training. It's different than the ethics training of AB 1234. These are the local ethics that the council in the past have passed as a guide for council members regarding ethics. So, can we have the staff? Could you announce the item number 9, and then we have the staff report.
Item 9, Code of Ethics Review.
Staff report.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, this is, I guess, your annual review of this. The Solvang City Council adopted its Code of Ethics for members of the Solvang City Council, boards, and commissions on November 12th of 2002, and it was last reviewed by the City Council on July 22nd of 2013. As I said, the document indicates that it should be reviewed annually. We've obviously missed a couple of years on that, so we did bring that before you today. The Code of Ethics is attached to your staff report and has 18 sections. I'll list the 18, and then really it's up to the council to decide if they want to go through those individually or discuss possible changes to anything. But number 1 is acts in the public interest. Section 2 is comply with the law. 3 is conduct of members. 4, respect for the process. 5, conduct of public meetings. 6, decisions based on merit. 7, communication. 8, conflict of interest. 9, gifts and favors. 10, confidential information. 11, use of public resources. 12, representation of private interest. 13, advocacy. 14, policy role members. 15, independence of boards and commissions. 16, positive workplace environment. 17, implementation. 18, compliance and enforcement. The only thing you may want to potentially consider is our conflict of interest code, as Dave just did, gets reviewed every year. The council may want to modify, every other year. You may want to modify this code of ethics to state every other year, since we haven't really done it every year, but or you could maintain that. But really, this item was to do your review of the code of ethics and then give staff any direction for possible changes.
Thank you. Is there any questions of the staff report?
I just have a question, and it's directed to the city attorney. Are we covering ourselves with all of this? Are there other areas that we need to be aware of?
You're statutorily required to adopt a conflict of interest code, and that's the one that goes to the FPPC every other year. The code of ethics that you have is it's self-imposed. It's not required by legal standards, but it does provide you an opportunity to decide how you would like the council to operate as a body. So you have wider latitude, I would say, in setting this particular code of ethics than you would necessarily with a conflict of interest code that's required by the FPPC.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Anybody want to take a minute to expand on any of these items for added information? We'll sign a certificate that we've read and understand the ethics. This, what we have here is a brief reading of them. With that, it's time to go to the public for comment. Does anybody, I have no speaker slips on this particular item. If somebody would like to speak on the item? I turned one in. Did you? Oh, for item number 9? Oh, no, I'm sorry. That's all right, yeah. This is for item number 9. If there's anybody in the audience that wishes to speak or question our code of ethics that we have imposed on ourselves, this is your chance. And or if you'd like a greater explanation of any one of these particular 16 or 18 particular paragraphs, we'd be happy to continue on with that. If not, then we'll come back to the council for discussion and action, which is review. Are there any other comments or points you would like to make on this? Any questions?
I know we were talking about the frequency of this. I think I like the every other year, and I think probably doing it just right after an election makes a lot of sense, just as we're doing now. Maybe not, the meeting of the new person, but within, say, a month. That would make sense, as we're doing now.
Can you bring back something that we can?
Yeah, if you give me direction, we can just make that part of the change to it, because we were asking for directions. I don't know that you need a formal council approval. If you give us direction and you have a vote of the council to change it, we can definitely make that.
After every second election year? Every 2 years?
Every 2 years, yeah.
After the election? Sounds like a plan.
They need to vote on that, Dave?
Yeah.
You're going to need to make a motion on that.
We need a motion.
Okay, so that's my motion.
I'll second it.
This was moved and seconded. Would you read the motion, please? No, what is the motion?
To review it every other year.
Review every other year on,
year.
very shortly after an election.
On election years, right? Yeah, okay,
No,
cool.
it'd be off an election year since we,
Would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Deuce,
yes.
Jameson,
Yes.
Toussaint,
Yes.
Zimmerman,
Yes.
Mayor Richardson.
Yes, that passes with a 5-0. Okay, now we're out to public communications, written or verbal. At this time, please direct comments to the city council regarding consent calendar items or matters not on the agenda but within the jurisdiction of the council. Speakers are limited to 5 minutes. I have one speaker slip with Lansing Duncan for item 1.
I think there might be a representative from WeWatch who wants to speak on
That's
non-agenda
Susan
items
Bolt.
too. But
Susan Bott, yeah.
yes, Mr. Chair. I'd like to speak to you about something which I had hoped to be able to incorporate into the discussion on our appeal regarding the amendment to the development plan of the Valley Plaza subdivision. You may be aware that refers to a revision that would allow the removal of a hedge and trees that were formerly required to be retained, and that was part of the approved development plan. Okay. I'm speaking right now, however, about another place where we have a situation that the developer is not confining his activities to the approved development plan. And of course, that is your principal handle on seeing that developers don't make up projects for themselves as they go along. If you don't exercise that tool, you have no way of knowing what the outcome of any given project will be. And it's your responsibility to be sure that the community and yourselves live up to that. In fact, you could put the developer in a very dangerous situation if you don't do that. If you look at the conditions of approval on any project, you'll see your standard that the grading, development, use, and maintenance of the property, the size, shape, arrangement, and location of structures, parking areas and landscape areas, and the protection and preservation of resources shall conform to the project description above, and the here exhibits and conditions of approval below. That's your standard boilerplate. And if you don't enforce that, you're going to end up with some surprises. And also, further down, it says any deviations from the project description, exhibits, or conditions must be reviewed and approved for conformity with this approval. Deviations may require approved changes to the permit and/or environmental review. Deviations without the above described approval will constitute a violation of permit approval. So if you, in fact, don't do your job in terms of seeing that you have compliance with the approved permit, you may actually be putting whoever the property owner is who's attempting to execute the conditions in danger themselves. The reason why I speak to you about this in regard to the Valley Plaza project is that it has come to our attention that they now plan to demolish the existing retaining wall, which is that is along Mission Drive on Highway 246, and replace it with a new retaining wall. They'll also be doing grading in that area. And I spoke to you in this same non-agenda public comment period before Christmas, when I became aware of the grading that was proposed there and the walls that were proposed there. And I'll point out to you that the walls are not in conformance with this approved plan. This is the proposed site plan. It specifically refers in this area to existing remaining wall and existing trees to remain. Okay? What's proposed now is not that wall. It's something different. And if you want to see that and get your own little copy of it, our handout this evening that has all the slides we're going to show you in our presentation, on page 12 has that. So if you look at the 12th page, you'll find this little plan, which specifically shows that on that section of the plan, it only speaks about an existing retaining wall and existing tree to remain. Now, the proposed plan does anticipate a little bit of new retaining wall along that area, and on this plan, I believe, although it's not called out, that that is supposed to be the area that's sort of on the corner. But it specifically says, in terms of your project description, a new retaining wall will be constructed at the easterly side of the existing wall. That obviously says that they're going to keep the existing wall, which will extend around the corner of Mission Drive and Alamo Pintado. So both on the plan and in the project description, you have a clear direction that an existing wall will stay there and not a new one. When I reviewed the grading plan for this, I could see.
Thank you, Lansing.
Okay,
5 minutes.
I could see those trees have a problem too.
Thank you. Susan Bott?
I'm Susan Bott representing We Watch tonight. And in reviewing this mercantile development, Valley Plaza, We Watch members discovered that the long-term retention of the sycamores along Highway 246 that Lansing just mentioned and Alamo Pintado, near the 246 intersection, the sycamores are jeopardized. We're addressing this issue separately from the later appeal because the later appeal doesn't cover this specific area. The proposed retaining wall in the parking lot are too close to the trunks of some of the sycamores, plus the grading will probably encroach upon the trunks. Our understanding is that this retaining wall is currently being reviewed by city engineers. If this is correct, we ask that the engineering staff carefully examine how best to protect these trees. Please ask them to consult with a local landscape architect whose training makes one knowledgeable about how grading, retaining walls, and parking lots must be constructed to protect trees before staff approves. Just parenthetically, I found out that an oak tree's root system, we all think of big oaks as having giant root systems, are basically all in the top 18 inches, no matter how big the tree is. So when you're grading around a tree, you can damage it irreparably. without it even looking like it. And it might take an oak a long time to die, but they do, and sycamores also. The previously approved development plan preserved the perimeter sycamores, and they satisfied Solvang's residents' concerns. Let's be sure its implementation achieves that requirement. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no other speaker slips. Anyone have any public comment at this time, as outlined before? What- yeah, what-
My name is Carrie Rossetti, and I live nearby. I have been checking the plans since the very beginning of the project. From a layman's neighbor point of view, I don't have a lot of knowledge about building and construction, but I have had a lot of concerns when I look at the drawings. Just as was pointed out, it didn't appear to me that there were envelopes that would protect the trees along 246. It looked as though the parking lot just literally went right up to whatever that retaining wall they're going to construct, and then I believe there's a sidewalk, and there's no accommodation for these gorgeous, huge, mature trees. It seems as though the project is becoming a piecemeal project. We were asked to come and meet with the builder on a Thursday at 1 p.m., which very few people were able to go. And we asked him questions about the phases, and he said, I don't know. So I came back and I looked at the drawings, and where the people helping people is, they did a squiggle around it. And I said, what is this? And they're, oh, well, we didn't get the 246, so we're just gonna squiggle around that and deal with that later. So what are we getting? Well, that's not part of the project now. They don't know what the grading is gonna be on that far driveway. There's drawings for 2 rows of parking that there's no room for because that's where people helping people pulls their truck in. It looks incomplete, and I don't understand how we as a community can sit back and feel comfortable with a project that doesn't look as though it's being completely and fully represented in the submitted plans. So that's my biggest concern, is that it's not just what's happening on Old Mission, it's what's happening with the entire project. And of course, the beautiful stately trees that line 246 as you enter Solvang, it makes a statement. And I'm really concerned with that we're looking at this, we're analyzing it, and we're fully aware and cognizant of exactly what's going on and what the ultimate outcome is going to be. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you for that. Is there anybody else you'd like to?
Thank you. Mark Oliver, St. Ines Valley Alliance. And I want to build on what she said, that the project has seemed to appear to be piecemealing at this point, and I think it's important, incumbent on you, to really take a look at what the pieces are. And it's not easy to discern what has happened. It's been difficult to analyze it and understand, as Lansing and I have done, and as you will see later. But take the time to look at it and understand what has happened and why it has transpired the way it has, and why it is in the position it is now. It has not been fully pulled together in I think in an organized fashion. It is piecemeal. And as she says, this could have some very unsavory consequences for us, especially in that this is the entrance to Solvang. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Seeing none, thank you very much for your comments. The people from the Planning Commission are here too. They heard those, and I think we'll take that under advisement. Next are council comments and requests. Would you like to start, Ms. Jamieson?
Hooray for rain. Isn't it wonderful? It's great. Don't get too comfortable. I'm going to implore each one of you to please write a letter to anybody that you know in the government of the state of California, any government official you know in any of the western states, and get them to do something positive about the retention of water. It has been since 1976 when any dams or reservoirs, large reservoirs, were created. Part of the problem is because we have three entities: Sacramento area, San Francisco area, and Los Angeles. They all have plenty of water. The rest of us are dying. So we need, as a group, it would be wonderful if the city of Solvang could get united and have a letter writing campaign to get the government of the state to address the issue of retaining water. Don't let it all go to the ocean. Don't let it all go down the drain, so to speak. We need to gather it. We need to have it so that we don't experience what we're going through right now. So I would ask each one of you, please write a letter. Do some research. Find out why we do not have adequate storage. Those are my comments. Happy New Year, by the way.
Mr. Deuce.
I have no comments tonight, other than it's good to see everybody out here. It's nice to play for a full house once or twice a year. No, seriously, it is. And Happy New Year.
Ryan.
No comments.
Neil.
Happy New Year, and let's get on with it. Thank you.
I want to make everyone aware of how hard our Parks and Recs Department have worked during the month of December, and up till the other day. They're responsible for the beauty of the city around the parks that we've enjoyed for Christmas. The Christmas tree that they put up, the way that they designed the guy wires with packages underneath it, the sled that was out there, the houses out there for Santa Claus, all that came from our employees in the city. And they've done a wonderful job. That leads right down to the tree burning last Friday. They did a wonderful job on that. The coming together of the food wagons, the music, the firemen, and all that was put together by the Parks and Rec Department. And that's Fred Langman and his crew and the volunteers. We really appreciate it and want them to be aware of how much the city, how well they make the city look during the Christmas time. Those are my comments. Approval of the agenda is presented. Anybody wants to make any more changes to the agenda?
I'd like to pull item 6B.
Well, we'll go into that next.
Oh, okay.
City Council minutes of December the 12th of 2016. Are there any corrections, additions, or deletions to the minutes? If not, can I have a motion?
Both of them?
Both of them? Agendas 1 and 2, yes.
I'll make a motion, we approve.
Sorry.
I'll second.
I approved
Yep.
them.
You made a motion on both of them?
Yes.
And there's been a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstained? Pass. 5-0. On to the consent agenda. Does anybody wish to pull any items off the consent agenda? Now, Ryan.
All right, so I'd like to pull item 6B because I'm still investigating this item, and if I can need more information to make a
Okay.
informed decision.
Well, then let's discuss, would you read that, please?
Item 6B, Amendment Number 1 to Professional Services Agreement with GSI Water Solutions Incorporated for
Can we have a
technical
staff
services associated with a state permit.
Can we have a staff report on that, please?
Good evening, Mayor Richardson and council members. Matt Vanderlinden, your Public Works Director and City Engineer. And so, as you're aware, the city is working on our new River Wells project. So that project is a project to, at this point, to construct 2 new wells along the San Ynez River. We currently have 2 wells along the river right now, well 3 and 7A. Those wells draw water from the river underflow, so whenever there's water available in Lake Cachuma, there are water rights releases for the benefit of the downstream water rights holders, and those wells extract water from that underflow. However, with this particular project, as you recall, a few years back, the City Council approved the EIR, or the Environmental Impact Report, for the Water Master Plan update, which included the primary project of these new river wells. So in order to implement the river well project, the city of Solvang needed to modify our existing permit with the state. So right now we have a permit with the State Water Resources Control Board to extract water from those river wells along a certain reach of the river. But when we went through the environmental impact report process, we received several comments and basically complaints from other agencies and the Alisal Ranch here requesting that we move those wells, the proposed wells, downstream so that the new wells would be further away from their existing wells. So now that put us in a situation where we needed to amend our permit, because our permit covered a certain reach of the river where wells 3 and 7A are. Now we had agreed to move the wells downstream away from their wells, so we have to amend our permit. So in addition to that, we need a time extension to allow us time to construct these 2 new wells. And if you recall, the EIR that the City Council approved included up to 6 wells, all downstream from the Alisal Bridge, downstream from the Alisal Ranch and San Ynez ID1 Water District wells. So we want time to construct those 2 new wells and then see how things go in the future and give future city councils and the future city staff time where they could construct wells, those additional 4 other wells possibly. So we're requesting a time extension and an expanded reach of diversion with our permit. So as part of that process, we had to submit a big application package to the State Water Resources Control Board. And part of their process is to make a public notice of our request to amend our permit. So when they made that public notice, notifying the public that Solvang wants to amend its permit to expand our reach of diversion and for a 15-year time extension, again, the first 2 wells we want to construct will only take a few years, but we want to give time for future city councils, possibly to construct more wells downstream. But anyway, so when they issued that public notice, we received 4 protests to our application to amend our permit. So we received a protest from Alisal Ranch, ID1, National Marine Fisheries Service, and Cal Trout. So in order to work with those agencies and come to an agreement what the state requires to move forward with our application to amend our permit, the state requires that we come to agreement with all those 4 agencies. So in a sense, we're kind of like held hostage because we have to try to negotiate with them and talk reason with them to get them to compromise a little bit, and we'll try to compromise a little bit. But in that process of coming to agreements with them and negotiating with them, we had to do extensive research on what's exactly going on in the river and with their wells. So we shared with them all our information, and they shared with us all their history of pumping their river wells and everything. And so we we have a special water attorney, in addition to Hanley and Fleischman. Hopefully it's right. Anyway, so we have a special water attorney, but we need special experts, these hydrogeologists, to take a look at the history of pumping by ID1 and Alisal Ranch, what the water levels are doing in the river, the frequency of releases from Lake Chuma and how those releases impact their wells and our wells, and develop what we're referring to as an operations plan. So we've been working diligently. We've had several meetings with our hydrogeologists and Alisal Ranch and ID1 with their hydrogeologists. We've developed, I think it's about a 12 or 14-page operations plan. And this operations plan is basically, it's like the rules by which Solvang will operate our river wells, so in such a way as not to impact their ability to pump water from their wells. So basically, Alisal Ranch has the highest or superior prior rights. They have riparian rights, and ID1 is upstream from us, and they have they were able to perfect their permit and get a license from the state for their wells. And so we have to, so we've been working on this operations plan to spell out exactly how we'll operate our wells so as not to impact them. And that's why we've had these hydrogeologists working. They've been meeting, like I said, they've had several meetings with Alisal Ranch and ID1, and they've spent quite a bit of time developing this operations plan. They've now created a table, which is sort of a graphical representation of the operations plan, because ultimately we're going to have to give this to our water operators in the city water division, and they gotta have it simplified so they can actually implement it on a day-to-day basis. But anyway, so there's a lot of details in that. So our hydrogeologists have been working on that. The city manager is authorized to make expenditures up to a certain level. At this point, we need to exceed that level of expenditure with the hydrogeologists. It's GSI Water Solutions. And in order to finish this process, come to agreement with these 4 entities and go back to the state and say, hey, we've come to agreement, we've resolved these protests, and please move forward and issue us an amended permit. So that's where we are in the process. That's why we need this authorization to increase a little bit more the expenditures with this consultant.
Thank you, Matt. Are there any questions of his presentation?
No.
Thank you, Matt. We'll take it to the public for comment. Is anyone in the public wish to comment on this particular item? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the council for action. We can combine this as a consent calendar item with the other consent calendar item as one vote. Can I have a motion accepting the consent calendar?
I'll make that motion. We accept consent calendar A and B.
Can I have a second?
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded. Can I have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Deuce?
Yes.
Jameson?
Yes.
Tucson?
Yes.
Zimmerman?
Yes.
Mayor Richardson?
Yes, and that passes with a 5-0. On to the regular agenda, item 7.
Item 7, appeal of Planning Commission approval of an amendment to the Mercantile Valley Plaza Development Plan and approval of an addendum to the mitigated negative declaration.
Staff report.
Good evening. Mr. Mayor, members of council, we're here tonight to consider an appeal of the Planning Commission's approval of an amendment to the approved development plan for the Valley Plaza, also known as the Mercantile Center, and an approval of the addendum to the mitigated neg deck associated with that project. The appellants are Mr. Lansing Duncan, along with the San Ynez Valley Alliance. And the background is that they filed an appeal on the 15th of December of 2016 regarding the Planning Commission's approval of December 5th for this amendment to the development plan. The amendment was requested by the developer to allow them to remove 5 existing trees and a hedge located on the side of the shopping center adjacent to Old Mission Drive. Just a reminder, the nature of the appeal is limited to the Planning Commission decision, as Section 11-17-5C2 of the Municipal Code provides that appellants shall be entitled to raise and appeal to the City Council only issues that were raised before the officer, board, or commission whose decision is being appealed. The recent brief history of this project is that on April 4th, the Planning Commission held a public hearing and approved the development plan for the reconfiguration and the reconstruction of the Valley Plaza Shopping Center. There was a proposal at that point to remove 17 mature trees and retain 10 trees on the site. At the time, they intended to retain all the trees on the perimeter of the site with removal of the trees generally focused in the center of the site. But as detailed plans were prepared for the site work, including the retaining walls, it became apparent that the 5 existing trees and a hedge located on the side of Old Mission Drive there between the existing driveways could be damaged by the expansion of an existing retaining wall. And as required with a condition of approval, an arborist report was prepared after investigation, and it was recommended by that arborist that there was a great likelihood of structural failure or tree health decline, and the recommendation was that those trees and the hedge be removed. Following the extensive public comment period on the 5th of December, the Planning Commission approved by a vote of 401 to approve the amendment to the development plan to allow the removal of the hedge and trees. And there was a condition added that the applicant submit a landscaping and fencing plan and gain approval from the BAR before the removal occurs. So just to review, if council denies the appeal, the request to the BAR for that review of that landscaping and fencing plan, that replacement plan will go forward. If the council supports the appeal, the trees and hedge would remain. This would not change, however, the requirements for the retaining wall construction work, and it's staff's opinion that the health of the existing 5 trees and the hedge would be compromised by this work, and the opportunity to evaluate scenarios and create an effective and attractive replacement planting would be lost. The developer does intend to submit several scenarios for replacement planting and fencing plans to the BAR, and that has actually been underway at this point. That concludes staff's report, and I'm available for any questions you may have.
Are there any questions of staff report? Mr. Deuce? No? None? Thank you, Holly.
Yes.
I'd like to set some ground rules for this presentations. Holly overlooked reading one particular important sentence, I believe, in the overall discussion about the appellant shall be entitled to raise an appeal to the City Council of only issues that were raised before the officer, board, and commission whose decision is being appealed. The next sentence reads, the issue before the Planning Commission was a request to modify the landscaping on one area of the project site. No other issues relating to the development plan were raised at the Planning Commission, nor are they an issue before the council. That is to say, we're going to be discussing the 5 trees in the hedge on the on the north side of the property. The terms of the presentation are that the appellants will be given 15 minutes to make their presentation. The developer will be given 15 minutes to make his presentation. After the appellate's presentation, there will be a question session made by the council of indeterminate length. The same follows after the development presentation. There will be a 5-minute rebuttal presentation, if necessary, by the appellate and also by the developer. After those presentations are complete, we'll bring it back to the council for questions. Then we'll take it to the public for comment. After it comes back from the public for comment, all the comments will be recognized. Then we'll make the decision on whether or not to agree with the appeal or not. So with that, Lansing, you get your first 15 minutes.
He's going to need to sit here. We're going to need a little bit of technical stuff to get it set.
We have some technical experts here, so we understand.
Just go by that page. Just skip that one. Well, hopefully we will not need your new council member.
Looking for the full screen here,
Okay.
the PDF. Okay.
Oh, that's fine for that. That's it. Okay. There we go. Happy New Year, council members. Thank you for this opportunity. We have appealed the Planning Commission's decision of December 5th, 2016, because that decision was based on misinformation. And when I say we, I'm referring to myself and the Valley Alliance, and there are also neighbors who live on both Honey Locust and Old Mission who have contributed to the cost of the appeal. We trust the City Council will give us the opportunity to disclose the information necessary to provide much-needed clarity and transparency to the project review and compliance process. This is a particularly complex project, and it will take some time. If you remember, it incorporates this Caltrans option. It's gone through many different revisions, and perhaps it could be said that because it hasn't been looked at closely enough, we're in the situation that we are today. Our goal is well-informed decision-making that truly serves the best interests of the city and its residents, and we're going to apologize up front. We don't mean to offend anybody, and so we want to commend the advice of Councilman Ed Skitt that he just made here a couple of weeks ago when he was giving Council Member Toussaint his advice. Don't take it personally. So if we go to the next page. As I mentioned before, the project description is the basic tool that you use to make sure developers don't make up the project as they go along. The grading, development, use, and maintenance of the property, the size, shape, arrangement, and location of structures, parking areas, and landscape areas, and the protection and preservation of resources shall conform to the project description above and the hearing exhibits and conditions of approval below. And that's exactly why you're here tonight, because you've been asked to approve a request that is not consistent with the project description. If we can go to the next page, you've got it, Mark. Any deviations from the project description, exhibits, or conditions must be reviewed and approved for conformity with this approval. Deviations may require approved changes to the permit and/or environmental review. Deviations without the above described approval will constitute a violation of permit approval. And I would argue that once the developer says, I want to go out of the box, you should be very careful that what he's doing is only what he is saying in terms of going out of the box. You know, that just makes sense, okay? Is this the only thing you're really doing that doesn't comply? Maybe there's something else. We should have a skeptical eye in that regard. The developer wants you to approve an amendment that would allow the removal of 5 trees and a hedge, but the work plan deviates from the project description far more significantly than this amendment describes, and the addendum to the environmental review covers. The impacts are more extensive, cover other areas of the site, and conflict with other aspects of the approved plans. How did this project, the city, and our neighborhood get to this point? If you remember, when this project was first brought to the city's attention, it envisioned connection with 246. It envisioned removing all the trees on the site. It envisioned a great deal of grading, a large retaining wall in the back, and a lot of fill in the front. Solvang, however, does have policies to ensure that development is compatible with adjoining neighborhoods, as in this case, and there was pushback from the city because it also involved removal of trees, which there are policies about. So your staff recommended that the developer meet with the neighbors and talk to them, and Mark Oliver of the Valley Alliance arranged a meeting with the developers. We were very glad to have that opportunity. It occurred on April 27th, and then we had a follow-up meeting on June 11th. When we came to that June 11th meeting.
Lansing, just
Yes.
just so I can keep up, what year was that?
2015.
15, okay, thank you.
2015. So June 11th, we had a meeting with them, and we were told, thank you for your comments. We have a better project. And in order to show how it was a better project, they provided us with a letter. It was a letter from Steve Rigor, the project architect, to Josh Richmond, property owner, and to Clint Pierce, the developer. And it points out a number of things, and I know that's hard to read, so I'm just going to shoot to a detail of those most important parts of it. Quote, below are some of the concerns brought up at our previous meeting with the San Ynez Valley Alliance and how we addressed each item. 1, Grading, work with the existing grades in order to lessen the amount of export. Work with the existing topography. A, adjusted site plan to utilize most of the existing retaining walls along Old Mission Drive and Highway 246. B, adjusted new frontiers and shops B pad finish floor elevations to be more in line with the existing condition. This allowed us to save the existing retaining wall along Old Mission. And down under number 4, landscaping, they mentioned it adjusted the site to enable us to save the existing trees and hedge along the Old Mission. Obviously, what this shows is a understanding of these different factors and the relationship that if you change one thing, you're going to change something else. And they provided us with a new grading plan, and this one showed a finish floor of 470.50 as compared to the previous one, which was 468. So they had actually brought up the grade to bring it more in line with the topography. Now, I've annotated this plan so you can read it a little bit more, and I've made the notations minimal grade change and received June 11th, 2015, and I've pointed to where the tree locations are and noted that it has a minimal grade change for that. It was from this point on that the project described itself as keeping the perimeter trees, using the existing retaining walls, keeping the hedge along Old Mission. And we're not showing you this because the VA expect the project not to change at all. In fact, the project did change. Connectivity with 246 changed. So some of those changes were to be expected, but there were other changes that we were surprised by. And then if you go, you will see, and this is from the approved set of plans. These were provided in a packet of plans March 4th, approved by the Planning Commission on April 4th, and they showed those existing trees and hedge here along the backside of New Frontiers. They showed the existing trees along the backside here of the building that would have the shops and the apartments and the hedge. And you'll see the call-outs, which specifically say existing trees and hedge to remain. If you go to the site plan that they provided, which is part of the same packet, it also showed existing trees to remain, existing retaining wall, when you look actually in many areas of the site. And then they showed us sections which showed that along Old Mission, it was going to have the existing trees remain, and there's no new retaining walls called out there, if you notice. The only place they do call out a new retaining wall is actually, if you go to the next slide, in this one little spot where we always anticipated, because it's in the project description. No, you're ahead of yourself there. It turns out back. Okay, there we go. That's the one we want. So at this point, this is showing a new retaining wall here, and that's because this section goes through here, and we knew from the project description a little tail end was to be added to the existing wall down here. Just stay on that one for a while. Okay. So having seen all these plans and all these reassurances that the hedge and tree would remain, now you can turn to the next one, we were blindsided to hear in November, 7 months after the project was approved, that now those trees and that hedge would not be able to stay there. And we wondered, how could that have occurred? Okay. If you go to the next slide. Well, what the public was told was this is necessitated by the Americans with Disabilities Act. It turns out we have to replace the brick wall, and replacing that could substantially damage the hedge and those trees along the back, according to the professional arborist we hired. And we're trying to be proactive about this. We came to the city immediately when we realized this was an issue. These are all quotes found in the San Ynez Valley News in December of this year, explaining how this happened. Well, we wondered how it happened too. And so what we did is pull out the actual preliminary grading plan, which was in the set, which was approved on April 4th, submitted on March 4th, part of the same set. And I've annotated that plan so you can read it better. And what we discovered was that, in fact, they had made huge grading changes between the time they'd spoken to us and the time they submitted. And these grading changes would have obviously, if anybody looked at it in detail, revealed that those trees could not stay. You can see that the grades are changed so that they're 2, 3, in one place it's even 4 feet down below the grade that it was before. And obviously, if you grade like that below an existing retaining wall, it is gone. You would have to replace it with something else. So we looked back at the letter that had been given us, and that letter showed a real clear understanding of how the grade of the finished floor building, finished floor of New Frontiers, related to keeping the existing retaining wall along Old Mission and the one on 246. You can see with all three of these arrows, they had a clear understanding of what they were doing when they submitted this plan. Okay. Whoever drew this plan, and it was actually drawn in February of this year. That's the last time revisions are noted on this plan. Okay. They knew the implications. They knew the implications compared to what the section drawing showed. And we considered, well, maybe ADA actually did require this sort of grading. But if so, they knew about it in February, right? And we considered, well, maybe grading changed between the preliminary and the final. But we spoke to your staff, and that was not the case. This showed the grading they wanted to meet ADA, but for some reason, they did not disclose it. And then we looked at, well, what about these new retaining walls? Is that consistent with the project description? And in reality, it isn't. This project, as you saw on the plan, called out keeping the existing retaining walls. It only mentions extending them. And this project description is actually the worst case scenario because it includes the Caltrans alternative. It talks about extending the existing wall westerly along Old Mission Drive, continuing around the perimeter till it comes down to Mission Drive. And then it also talks about on Mission Drive, just putting in that little tail end that I talked to you about in the section. So if we go to a diagram of that, I've made the schematic so you can see it a little bit more clearly. It's actually overlaid on that previously approved plan. I've put in green where the existing walls are. The red things are basically schematic. We're just trying to put into lines what was in those words. Obviously, if they were to do the Caltrans alternative, they would need this wall that went around the side. It actually would be probably curved. And they would also need a return wall here. And in fact, this return wall would actually probably curve like this. And that's probably the only place, I think, where they weren't planning originally to keep that retaining wall. And here's that little tail end. But that's what's written in terms of the project description. You know, that's what they're supposed to do. Okay, you can go to the next one, and we do not want to talk about this because we're sort of ignoring this. Okay. Then we'll go to the next one, and we don't want to talk about this. And we go to the next one, and we can talk about the top of this. The top of this is what they're proposing to do now. The problem is they have asked to take out the trees in the hedge, and they've made the case that that's all we're doing. But let's think about the logic here. The logic is it's ADA, which is requiring the grading. The grading is requiring demolishing the existing retaining walls and building new. And because of that, we have to take out the trees and the hedge. Well, the trouble is they're not acknowledging the middle thing in that chain of logic, which is that they're planning to demo the existing walls and replace them with new. That is not part of what's been put before you. In fact, there is sort of a misrepresentation even in your staff report in as much as it talks about enlarging a retaining wall. That's an interesting, actually, it's a change in language from what the Planning Commission heard. They actually heard language which said construction of a retaining wall. But neither of those things speak to the real issue there, is it's a complete change in the project. So if you actually just do what they say, it's a blank check to ignore the approved project description, carry out regrading, demolition, and construction that would kill the trees they promised to preserve. The last-minute post-approval timing of this request is certainly problematic for the city and the community, and it should not provide a rationale for making concessions that would not have been made at the time the project was approved. In fact, the timing of the current project request is entirely the responsibility and choice of the developers. If it delays the project, it's their responsibility. If it's a problem of their own making. So, how do we get this runaway train back on track? Oh, and we're going to have to suggest some changes, a little bit to
Be
this.
brief. I'll give you some extra time, but be brief.
Yeah, right. We're definitely wrapping it up here. On my last couple slides
Okay,
here.
good.
So, this is what we think you need to do. You need to uphold the appeal and deny this specific request because it's incomplete. It doesn't acknowledge that they're doing this with the walls, which does not fit the project description. It doesn't address the full extent of the revisions to the project that are proposed. And it doesn't address the impacts. There's no analysis of that. Doesn't contain the necessary CEQA analysis. Now, if you really wanted to do the inclusive thing and try to do the best job on this, what you can do is actually deny this without prejudice and then allow a complete project to come back to you. We would hope that that would in fact to look at other changes that they're doing that aren't the subject of this appeal. Okay. So if you go to the next page, what we would want you to do is to direct staff and the developers to return with a complete revision package that includes all the demolition of existing retaining walls proposed, all the new retaining walls not previously proposed. We wanted to hope that you would do number 3, but it would seem out of your ability right now, although I would argue you're losing leverage. And we would ask you to include the necessary policy consistency and CEQA analysis. So that is sort of a clear statement of what we think would be a logical, clear development review process going forward where everybody could be on the same page and know what was happening. And we would regain our control of what is a very important eastern gateway to your city. Thank you for your time. And we're very glad to answer any questions, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Lansing. That's a great presentation. Are there any questions of the presentation? No, I don't see any questions. No questions.
Thank you for your
Very
time.
good. Thank you, Lansing. Your turn.
Mayor Richardson and council, thank you for letting us speak on this. My name is Clint Pierce, and just to give you a quick background of my role, I've got a long-standing relationship with the folks at New Frontiers. We developed a store for them up in San Luis Obispo, and that's how I got to meet the Richmond family. So I came on board early on to help with the development of the new store, as well as the redevelopment of the shopping center. So I've been helping Josh and his family with this project from the beginning. So I wanted to give you also a little bit of context on the beginning, the middle, and where we're at now. So it was always our intention to outreach to the community, find out what their requests and desires were. Of course, that also needs to blend with what a tenant needs are, in this case, New Frontiers and some others, but primarily New Frontiers. And then you have city ordinance and regulation, state, federal, so on and so forth. And so as you know, I know I'm preaching to the choir when I say this, but the development process, it starts a little bit as art, and then the science follows that. You do engineering on the front end to some degree to get things dialed in on what a conceptual plan is. And that conceptual plan basically brings in those general requirements and ordinances that you know you need to find a way to fit into the project. Those part of those were the community's request to keep that hedge and keep as many of the mature trees as we could. And that was our full intention, and it still is. We We had our conceptual plan designed that way. And it was only when we got into the science, deeper into the evolution of the engineering of the site, and that's when you start overlaying all of the necessary truck movements, ADA requirements. And the ADA, just to kind of get down into the weeds just a little bit more on that, really it's the percentage fall. You can have very little percentage fall to comply with those ADA paths of travel. And we also had the community's desire to not change the grades significantly and have building heights at a certain elevation, and you don't want shopping carts rolling up down a hill. So there's all of these requirements that come in and create a project. And that's the science. That's the engineers spend, and I can tell you it wasn't in February when they knew all this stuff, because it takes them a long time to go through all of the work to get the science, the engineering complete to where it's something that the city can approve. Now, not that long ago also, we had the arborist report. And even when that engineering got somewhat evolved, we still thought that we could save the trees, and we thought that the hedge was going to be okay too. It was the arborist that came with a report that said, yeah, well, you can build this, but I'm not confident that those trees are going to survive. And so that's when, and I thought staff did a great job basically describing this. Lansing put up Josh's quote in the paper. That's exactly what it was. We were trying to be forthcoming, transparent, and do the right thing by saying, look, we have just discovered this conflict and we want to resolve it in the right way. Now, shifting forward a little bit. So we've requested that we can remove this hedge. And it's not eliminating the hedge, it's just removing it and we can put a hedge that's virtually similar or the same when we're done. We've got our landscape architect working on some very nice aesthetic screening. It could, we feel, could even be better than the hedge that's there, but certainly could be pretty much exactly like the hedge that's there when we're done. We've got a replanting planning, and again, as you know, this is all going to come back before the BAR and be decided on. It's going to be thoroughly vetted, and what's going to go in there is going to be very attractive and very functional. And so we just ask you to stand behind the Planning Commission on their ruling. We feel like it's a wonderful project. We've been working very, very hard to accommodate all of the stakeholders' needs and requests, including the neighbors. And in fact, we've outreached to the neighbors, even with this replanning plan, to get input. We haven't got their input yet, but we welcome them, and I give that invitation again that we would like to have them meet with us to come up with a screening that they like to get the best outcome for this project. And I don't know if Josh had anything to say or not, but that, again, staff did a really good job of just describing where we're at and what we plan to do, and we feel like it's going to be for the good of the project and for the community.
Thank you. Is there any questions for the, yes?
Is it a significant increase in cost to do the new retaining wall?
Yeah, we would rather not do this. It's over $300,000 in increased cost to do this, to make these grades work, to meet all of these requirements. So this is not insignificant as an impact on cost.
Thanks.
My questions I have is, do you have any comments on the presentation made by the appellants? As far as what you understand that their question is, their confusions are, do you have any comments on their presentation at all?
Well, speaking strictly with the 5 trees in the wall, in the hedge, I mean, I can see where they are coming from, and I'm telling you here too, we committed early on, we're going to do everything we can. We said we're going to protect that hedge and those mature trees, and that's what we fully intended to do. But along came the science, and it turned out with, you know, federal regulations and arborist reports, and that couldn't happen.
Thank you for that. Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Lansing, you have 5-minute rebuttal. Do you have a rebuttal?
Mr. Chair, I believe you want to hear from the public first, and then I
Well,
would
no,
like
no,
to-
your rebuttal has to be to their presentation.
That's not, Mr. Mayor, if I were the developer here speaking, you would ask me to speak after members of the public spoke in order to be able to address what they said too. Okay.
Well,
Aren't you gonna
I
hear
gave you
public
the ground
comment on
rules
this?
for how we're going to handle it, and I tend to stick to those. So you have a 5-minute rebuttal period if you'd like. You don't have to take it.
No, I will take it if this is the only thing that is offered, Mr. Mayor, but I think the public might be better served if I could comment on all those comments that might either support or would not support the appeal. In regards, first, Mr. Mayor, I would like to know that there is no further comment, or there's rebuttal after me, you said. That's what you said, didn't you? Okay. I don't want to be caught in the same position that we were at the Planning Commission, where there was an after public comment, after the developer's normal time to speak, where you were actually in the Planning Commission was in deliberations, when we had some allegations made that were simply, we were unable to contest, even though they were not true. So I will speak to what Mr. Pierce has said, and I will thank you for the opportunity. I think I've made a pretty clear case that there's been a substantial amount of misinformation regarding this project, that important information that would have allowed the city and the public to see that keeping the hedge and these trees was not disclosed. It was information that the developers knew. Okay? And I can't say why they didn't let us know that, but it is no surprise now to them that they had to do that. In terms of waiting for the arborist report or laying responsibility on the arborist, the poor arborist is the first guy from their side who stood up and told you the truth about what the grading would do, that the grading would require the removal of the hedge and the trees. And they delayed the timing of getting him out there, obviously, until the last minute. It's obviously been chosen to make this request after the approval and after they were underway to put you all in a very difficult situation. And it puts the public in a really difficult situation. We could not comment on the impacts of this project at the time when the project was reviewed, because this impact was not disclosed. Okay, this is not a good public process to have a situation like that. Okay, and that's why I'm also encouraging you to make sure your staff looks at all the changes that are proposed for this project, so that we get an opportunity for the public to know what is the cost of this project. You can't give somebody a blank check and then not expect to get dinged with a bill that you did not appreciate or understand at the beginning. Yeah. In terms of the arborist report, I think the arborist actually makes some very good comments, but then it's also full of misinformation. I gave you 2.5 pages of comments on the arborist report, which points out how unreliable some of the information that you've received regarding this project has been. So we would hope that you uphold the appeal, really ask to see the facts of this matter, give the community and your staff a good example in terms of what public process is. If somebody is asking for $5, and you should, make sure that they give you a receipt for $5 instead of, we'll pretend you're only asking for $1. Okay, these guys are asking for a lot more by being able to do this without even considering that these walls are not part of the project description that you approved. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Is there any questions for the rebuttal? Seeing none, thank you,
Okay,
Lansing.
thank you.
Josh, you have a 5-minute rebuttal period if you'd like.
First, thank you. First, I'd like to say that the last thing we want to do is put your council in a tough spot, in a corner. I mean, that's not what we intended to do. That's not that's not even in the universe of how we've operated. We've tried to be proactive. We've tried to be transparent. We've tried to be outreaching. In fact, we've done a lot of outreach to the community, and a lot of their comments and requests are in the project. This issue, subject of this appeal, is we didn't hope to be here by trying to trick somebody. That's not what happened. We have operated in good faith from day one. We are trying to build the very best project we can for the community, and that is for the customers of New Frontiers and those other shops. It's for the neighbors that live nearby and visitors to come to town, and ultimately the city for tax revenues and all that, and also for the Richmond family to have a wonderful project that they can be proud of. So we are not trying to hide the ball. There have been a lot of assumptions about what we intended to do or hiding the ball and all this. That's not the case. And I can assure you we've tried really hard to be as thorough and complete as possible. And we, again, just hope that you can uphold the Planning Commission ruling and allow us to move forward with these changes.
Thank you. Are there any
Thank you.
questions? That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
With that, we'll go to the public for public comment. I have a few speaker slips. Tara Wood. Followed by Susan Bott.
Maybe now I got to put this way down. Hello, I'm Tara Wood. I am a former city council member, a former planning commissioner, a former BAR member, and a current rec member. So I've seen a lot of stuff. I just want to say I think that you should uphold your staff's suggestion and deny the appeal. I believe that the Richmonds have acted in good faith. I believe that pretending that they haven't and not backing it up is an insult to you and to me and to the community. And I think that we need to understand that this is an evolution. The process works. It takes forever. There will be constant changes until the day that they cut the ribbon to open it. That's how it works. We all know that. We've seen it. We've watched it. We know that the developer's not going to be happy. The Richmonds aren't going to be happy. The Alliance isn't going to be happy. But somewhere along the line, it will all work, and it will all turn out the way it's supposed to be, and it will be a great entrance for Solvang on the eastern side. My hope is that with this city council or whatever city council annexes my end of town, that the developer and the planners will consider how lovely the new Valley Plaza is going to be and make a complimentary entrance at the eastern end of town. So that would be what I would hope would happen. So I urge you to deny the appeal. Thank you.
Thank you. Susan Bott. Followed by Carol Lehman.
Again, I'm Susan Bott, representing We Watch. And We Watch's goal is to sustain the beauty and environment of the San Ynez Valley. In looking at the mercantile development, we're concerned that it be the very best possible project and that it will enhance Solvang in our valley. We hope the city and the developer are approaching the project with these priorities too. We recognize the problems of delays for the developer, but in this case, we believe it's critical that the old Mission Drive retaining wall and the related existing hedge and trees of this complex project be revisited and resolved very carefully. It's why we support Valley Alliance's appeal of Planning Commission approval of the mercantile developer's request to amend the approved development plan. We're asking that this project be returned to the Planning Commission for review of alternatives that retain the existing wall instead of or along with a new wall. ADA rules may be a problem, but negotiation is possible. No one seems to be claiming the existing wall is structurally unsound. If the existing retaining wall is removed along Old Mission Drive, soil erosion is expected to make the current hedge and trees no longer viable. The existing mature hedge screens the work area and provides protection from the drop-off for neighbors and passers-by. Trees embedded in the hedge further screen. Adequately mitigating the neighborhood's loss of these plants may well be impossible. The grading plan, parking lot, and landscape design are intertwined. These matters on this difficult redevelopment site require the coordinated expertise of civil engineers, landscape architects, as well as an arborist. It is asking a lot of lay citizens on boards and commissions to make decisions on these issues without access to neutral experts. We urge you to support the appeal so these problems can be resolved before moving forward. Taking time now can make it a satisfying project for all who view and use this site. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Susan. Carolyn Lehman, followed by Ken Lehman.
Good evening, everybody. I live on Honey Locust Court, and I've been there for about 13 years. And when I first moved in, there was New Frontiers, and it was a rather low-key, nice development. And I do like New Frontiers, and I've shopped there many times. So when they were to redo it, I was disappointed, but I looked at the plans, and the new building looks like it's going to be very kind of big and bold, and I'd call it maybe industrial chic. So it won't blend in like the old New Frontiers and Plaza did. You'll be able to kind of notice it. It's not a bad building. I wouldn't say it's an ugly building, but it won't be the same as it was before, just kind of blending in with the landscape. And with our little neighborhood, in my little cul-de-sac, we have about 7 very cute Cape Cod homes, kind of old-fashioned. And this is kind of a new industrial type building. But I do think that if you do leave the trees, it'll make the area look much more beautiful. I mean, the trees are gorgeous. They've been there a long time. And I think it's more of a win-win for everybody because you'll have the gateway to Solvang looking still beautiful. They'll be nice with the building. I think the building will look much better if you leave them there. The neighbors will be happy. And the developers and the architect should be happy too because I think it's going to be really beautiful. And so people will say, wow, what a fantastic, awesome project this is. So it should be a win-win for everybody if you can keep the trees there. And the motto is to plant a tree, not chop down a tree, right? So I would think that if possible, that they can keep the trees. That would be better for everybody. And so I guess that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. Ken Lehman, followed by Gabe Rossini.
Mr. Chair, council people, thank you for letting us make our comments tonight. And as my wife stated, we moved here back in 2003, and the valley is beautiful. It has trees, it has hedges, it has lots of bushes and things, and that's really what appealed to us. And to hear all the trees getting chopped down. I walk by that hedge, that long hedge, and those trees every morning because I go down on the corner. The mayor staked out one corner, I'm opposite the other corner to catch my van every morning. And those bushes, those hedges, they're developing berries on them right now. And in the spring when I walk by there, there's hundreds of birds and they're eating those berries. And the same with the trees, as the crows are flying across the way there. I see them in the mornings, and they're all in those trees, and they're talking and everything. And to see those get cut down and those hedges get torn down and put up a wall or whatever you're going to put up, it's going to take a lot of time if you're going to put bushes and things in there. So I hope that you'll uphold this appeal, and we get to keep those trees and the beauty that we're used to. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Gabe Rossini?
I'm Gabe Rossetti. Excuse me. We live on, that's okay. We
Followed
live
by-
on Old Mission Drive.
Yes.
1911, catty corner across from the project. And I had a deceased family member who was a large site construction supervisor in LA for 40 years.
Could you speak into the microphone a little bit,
Sorry.
please?
And he was a large site construction supervisor for over 40 years. He did projects that this project paled in comparison to what he did. What he used to tell me is it's easier to ask for forgiveness than it is to ask for permission. And I think with what Lansing showed is that's exactly what's happened. I'm kind of stunned by the hearing about the science of the project. Well, the science of the project is not everybody else's responsibility. It's the responsibility of the developer to know exactly what they're doing and what the repercussions of what they proposed are. So to come to a planning commission meeting, like Josh Richmond did, and point blame not just with the developer, he pointed blame at Lansing, the community, the planning department, and he said, quite frankly, the planning commission. I don't understand that. You know, we teach our kids, if you make a mistake, you hold up your hand, you said, I made a mistake, what can we do to rectify it? That's not what happened. As far as Josh is wanting to meet with the public to review a landscape plan, I sent an email to him, I think it was a day after the Planning Commission meeting, saying I'm in favor of the project, I'd like to meet with you to discuss some alternatives. He refused twice. He said because I needed to apologize to him for comments that I made. There's a part of me that wants an apology from him, because when they came to the Planning Commission meeting and showed a post and rail fence, that's insulting to the community. That doesn't show an understanding of what we need, what they promised, and what was there. So I would like to see you uphold the appeal. Thank you.
Thank you. Gary Blake?
Mr. Mayor, council members, I'm a property owner neighbor. We acquired the Cerny parcel just down the road, 8 lots, which we're working on. And so I've dived into this a little bit by talking both to staff, to Kiwi as well, on following their social media postings, trying to understand this, and also met with Mr. Richmond. I would just ask you to allow staff to do its job and the bar to do its job. Mr. Richmond has assured me that all of us, myself included, neighbors, will be able to look at design alternatives for that section of Old Mission that is in discussion tonight. And as a developer myself, I do believe, I've watched projects change over time, they do. I would like to think that they are above board, I believe they are. And it's in the best interest of the community to let this project follow the process, and for the public to have its ability at the right venue, which is the BAR, to provide its input and protest if there's any protest at that time. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I have no other speaker slips. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak on this project? We've got quite a crowd here. I'm sure there must be an opinion out there. And actually, I want to say that I want to congratulate you all for the civility we're seeing this evening. It's a great it shows great respect for the people of the city, and I appreciate you being here. And in fact, I think we'd like to see a full house all the time, show that the people are interested in the running of the city. With that, we'll bring it back to the council for discussion and decision. Who would like to start? Somebody's got to do it.
All right, I'll take the lead. I guess from what I heard tonight, the basis of this appeal seems a bit far-fetched as far as being some kind of conspiracy that they want to tear down these trees and also incur a $300,000 cost to their project. That out of the gate is a little far-fetched. I do have sympathy for the birds and the bees, truly, but hopefully it's a short-term displacement and we get some new trees in there, and I think it could look better. So, yeah, other than that, I think I want to support what other staff members and commissions, what their job is, and it should have never gone maybe further than that. But I do appreciate everybody coming out, speaking, and showing where their interest is. That's all. Thank you.
Ryan, you're next.
I guess the way I'm kind of looking at this is kind of like going through a house remodel. You know, there's a lot of things that do come up, and you can't always foresee all of them. But my standpoint on this is more coming from what is going to be the best solution moving forward. So I do have some concerns with keeping the trees on Old Mission. I did drive by there. They're so full of mistletoe to the point where they can look a little like an evergreen sycamore, which I don't believe exists. So I'd really like to see us focus on things that will benefit that area. I like the idea of a thicker wall that will actually block sound. I don't know if it needs to be higher. I know there's certain things that can be done to help push sound back down into the commercial development, versus just letting it go straight through the existing hedge that's there, because that's not going to do much for it. I think there's plenty of options for new trees, possibly more trees. I'd like to see a focus on evergreens, possibly ones that are a little lower with the head. Right now the sycamores are very tall. The head's high. If anything, it's going to be blocking your mountain views. I'd rather see new evergreen trees there that are actually going to soften the view year-round. Aside from that, that's where I'm at right now.
Mr. Deuce?
Thank you. I want to thank everybody for their input, and there's a lot to this issue here, there are some things I'd like to comment on. It would be great to keep trees, but I was on the site last Friday, and the superintendent was showing me where the final grade would be, and it is way under root level. I believe it's impossible to keep trees as much as we'd like to. The other alternative would be to raise the building pad 4 or 5 feet, and I don't think people would like that either. So it's what's practical, it's what's possible, things like that. One puzzle piece affects all the others. And this is something that I really want to put on the developer, and I know we're not talking about this right now, but look through it all. Because what I'm going to do is say that we deny this request. However, there needs to be conditions. that, there is a satisfactory concept that comes out of here that includes all the pieces that we need on this 300-foot strip at a minimum. That includes from the footing up to wherever you guys are going to finish it out. It has to be all-inclusive. It has to include the grading, every ADA, every parking, drainage, whatever you got in there has got to be figured into that plan. I want to know the aesthetics of it. I'm not going to sit here and design it for you. That's your architect's job. That's your designer's job. It's BAR's job to take a look at it. But most importantly, what I want is the neighborhood input. I feel this is important. And what I mean by neighborhood is these people that are directly affected. I just took a ride down there again tonight. Took a little cruise up Honey Locust, and these are the people that come out of the doorway and look at this thing. These are the ones that open their kitchen window and see it, draw the curtains back in their bedroom and see it. They're the ones that live with it. There are others on Old Mission that drive by it. They have to look at it too. Also up Mission Oaks. I tried to go up there. I couldn't get much further in the mailboxes. I don't know. You know, you guys got a lot of screening. I don't know if you can look into it, look over it, whatever. But I'm very sensitive about the people across the street. Those are the ones that I want to make sure that they have their input because they live in the backyard of this. So I think that pretty much covers what I want to say about this. Let's make sure that this is a win-win, as close to a win-win as we can for everybody concerned. I'd like to see the project go on, but not at the expense of the neighbors, not at the expense of our Eastern Gateway.
Ms. Jameson?
Well, most of what I was going to say has been said. However, I would like to address the condition of the sycamore trees now and the hedge. The sycamore trees are not healthy. Sycamore trees are water guzzlers. They usually live in very damp areas, and that is not a damp area. And I think they're dying at this point in time, and they are infested with mistletoe. They have not been taken care of. The hedge covers a wire fence. I'm not really sure. It's not, I would hate for a kid to fall in that hedge. I think they would get hurt. There are all kinds of different kind of wires that are in that hedge. I think it would be much more attractive if it were a wall and softened with vines that climb the wall, new trees. Evergreen trees, fine. Maybe you can even plant some oaks there. I don't know. But right now, I think it is not an attractive area. There is that hedge, and it does have flowers, and it has berries, and the birds love it. So do the rats and the mice. But I think it can be done better. And I'm not one for cutting down trees, but I think in this case, that's what's going to have to happen. And I would like the developer to work with the community if they can, sit down and talk. I know it's not easy. I'm a land use consultant, and I know that it doesn't always work, but maybe there can be a meeting of the minds. But I just cannot see granting the appeal. I'm sorry.
Full disclosure, I've had several discussions with Lansing, and I've had several discussions with Josh.
I need to do that too, ex parte. I had a long conversation with Josh.
Probably the same thing. I
I'll
did-
admit to it now. Come on, guys.
Yeah, and I talked to project manager down at the trailer on Friday.
I didn't talk to anybody. I wanted to come in this thing just clear-minded.
And I had a couple discussions with Lansing Duncan, Rossetti, and a brief one with Josh.
So that you know where we're coming from, we've been appraised of both sides of the issue, at least I have. And I appreciate Lansing's strong presentation, but I also appreciate Josh's position. And I was hoping, Josh, that you'd come up during your presentation and offer your view of what you would like to do with that part of the property. I know we discussed some of your possibilities. Lansing, if he comes up and talks about this, you caution me on this, that he'd come up after in public speaking, and then you'd be boxed out. Well, if Josh comes up, I will give you the opportunity to come up also. So Josh, would you like to come up and offer some of your viewpoints on what you might see there as a replacement for the hedge and the trees? Thank you.
We might change our minds.
That's the risk. Happy New Year, everyone. We've thought long and hard about this back wall, I can assure you. $300,000 is not a small number. It was not our first preference, but it became immediately clear we had to come and disclose this to the city and have a public forum to hear the issue out. We have spoken to some of the stakeholders in the neighborhood about potential replanting. I hear safety is a concern, aesthetics are a concern, and sound is a concern. I think those are the three concerns. My personal opinion is the hedge is unattractive, and I think we can do better. The trees, I would love to save trees. I'm an environmental studies major from UC Santa Barbara. I studied restoration ecology for 4 years. It's not my preference to cut down trees, trust me. We have 4 running concepts as to what we might do with the back of property line. The first is a split rail fence that would be complemented by at least 8, possibly 10 large trees that would be planted on the street side of the wall rather than down below. So you'd see the full height of the tree from the street view from Honey Locust and Old Mission Drive. That we have a version of the split rail fence going on the sidewalk side as well as on the wall side. So if the residents don't like the look of the split rail, for safety reasons, it would go on top of the wall. If they do like the look of the split rail, it could go against the sidewalk. Another concept is a 5 or 6 foot wall that would be built along the entire length of Old Mission Drive between our entrances with trees, vines, and shrubs to sort of mask and soften the wall. I don't know that a wall is my first preference, not really because of cost at this point, but I just don't know that the city wants to have to deal with potential graffiti issues. I think that the sound from semi-trucks and delivery vehicles, trash trucks, would reverberate off the wall and actually make the sound issue worse. New Frontiers has been there for 15 years. It's always been a grocery store. It's always had its trash in the back. It's always taken deliveries. It's never been an issue. We never received a single complaint that I can ever remember in 15 years about noise, about smell, about trash. Not a single one. So my preference would be to beautify that area of the center. It is our back of house in a sense, but it's also our front of house because those are 2 of our 3 main entrances. I would like to see it look better. Back there, we've incorporated architectural elements 360 degrees around the building so that residents aren't looking at brick walls like maybe you'd see at a Costco or a Best Buy. Roof lines, cantilever to the north towards Old Mission Drive. There are windows in the back. The truck bay is going to be shielded in part by a small brick wall. So I think we're taking steps to improve that side of the site for the benefit of the entire community, for the benefit of our tenants, who I think will more appreciate existing there in the center, which has struggled commercially, by the way, for 25 years, I think in part because of the look of the entrances. It's not the best looking center at the entrances. So you can rest assured that before we go to the BAR, we will have had conversations with the community. In fact, we've already been talking about reaching out and having a meeting with whoever's interested to opine on our replanting plan, our landscaping plan, provide opinions on plant choice, tree choice, and location. And we will incorporate as much of that into our plan as we reasonably can in the final project that would be approved by the BAR, landscape plan, I mean, that is.
I'd like to take a moment here to invite you to use this room for your outreach, to call a public meeting on your behalf and bring in the folks at a time convenient to them, because people are working, you know, and there are certain things that are going on. And maybe you might see with a crowd like this where you're in charge, you know, to take input and to get ideas of what they want to see. And frankly, that wall idea is a sound suppressor, better than trees or hedges. And I'm sorry that you're using the term fence that, I've now forgotten my mind here.
Split rail fence?
Split rail fence, because there's a split rail fence along Fjord Drive that leads out into the river that looks really susceptible to people trespassing. So it's going to have to, I wish you'd use another term or describe a fence in a different way besides split rail.
Well, I didn't want to use chain link.
No, that's I'm with you on that one.
And but another, you know, the split rail fence, I didn't want to delve into too much detail, but we currently show a 3-rail split rail fence, which is probably, I think the plan that some people have seen says 36 inches, but we can make it 42 inches. We can make it 6 feet. And we were going to incorporate in the split rail like square welded wire, which is, you can think of chain link, but think of square,
Big wire.
think of black, something that just, you don't see it,
Yeah.
but it's there to prevent dogs and children and people from falling into the planter and then off the wall. So there's no question that whatever we put there is going to be safe. It's going to be code compliant. The building code requires walls like that to have safety built into them to prevent that from happening. So at this point, it's really just an aesthetic preference that that we'd like to sort of come to an agreement on.
Is there anything else you'd like to say?
That's it.
Thanks a lot.
I'd just like to make a comment, kind of actually on one of your comments. And that is, I think it's great to have these meetings, to have this outreach to the public. And, you know, using a room like this. But I would caution not to let your backdoor neighbors get drowned out by the rest of the valley. These are the important ones, the ones that have to live next to it. Those are the ones you have to hear, for sure. And you guys that live in that little cul-de-sac there, or your driveway comes out on Old Mission Drive, be there and insist on you being heard. You guys are the important ones. You really are. You live with this project.
Thank you, Josh. Is there any other comments? No. Thank you. Lansing?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You've got this package of our slides that I gave you. If I could get you to refer to the last page and the very bottom of it. Okay. It's number 5. This was one of the things we wanted to have you include as an inclusive package considering all the impacts of this project. And so I'm just going to read it out because Councilman Deuce spoke about having this a conditional denial of our appeal. And in that way, it's a conditional approval of their removal of the trees and the hedge. And I would encourage you to go ahead and include this as a condition. And also, Councilmember Deuce spoke about having a fully developed, really fleshed out idea in terms of what was going to happen there. So the language I have right now is the inclusion of a well-considered, quote, replacement screening, wall, fence, etc., and landscaping on Old Mission Drive that considers safety, aesthetics, sound effects, maintenance responsibility, durability, drought tolerance, and graffiti. This replacement package must be compatible with the neighborhood and approved by a majority of the neighbors speaking at a duly noticed BAR meeting considering its approval.
I have a comment.
Yeah.
Are you sure you didn't discuss this over with Josh before you wrote this? This is what he just said. That's what I heard.
This is one of the solutions we've been working towards all along, Mr. Mayor.
In my mind, this is fantastic.
Okay, so what I would actually encourage you to do is to take that paragraph, number 5 there, and put in front of it a provision of a fully developed, well-considered ramp plate screening, etc., and make that a condition of your denial of our appeal. I think that makes the best result that we could have for the community at this point. And also, number 2, what I would like to suggest is you really follow up on Council members, Member Deuce's statement regarding consider everything. And I really do mean consider everything in terms of every part of the project. Thank you.
Thank you, Lansing. With that, we're going to close the public comment period, and we're going to bring this back to the council for discussion. We already started discussing it, and which included my invitation for you to schedule with the city manager a time. It can be in the evening, if necessary, but this is a public room that we offer to the public for nonprofits. You're a profit, but still, this is an important subject. So we encourage you to use it and get the folks together to come up with a real good solution to take to the BAR. Is there any other comments? Can I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor, before you make a motion, I just wanted to point out on the resolution, there's a word change that will need to be made. This is on the first page of the resolution, the third whereas. It says, whereas a timely appeal to the City Council, the Planning Commission's denial, that should be approval, was submitted.
Say that again.
The third whereas in the
Yes.
resolution itself, it says that the timely appeal of the City Council of the Planning Commission's denial. The Planning Commission approved it, so that denial should be approval. Just that one word change.
We'll change denial to approval. Okay, that's included in the motion. Mr. Deuce?
Okay, where is that one?
Resolution.
Yeah.
Keep turning pages.
Is it, which attachment?
It would be attachment D as in David.
Door, dog.
Okay, D. Okay, there we go. Okay. So I'll try to craft a motion on all this stuff here. And that will be to uphold, I guess, the denial of the Planning Commission? No. No.
Do the staff recommendation.
I'll do the staff recommendation with the conditions.
Which are?
The ones that I mentioned. Which were?
Did you want to use Lansing's?
Yes, but we are talking. Yeah, I'd like to use Lansing's, but I want this full inclusivity, so that we are looking, that we are not just looking at a footing, a retaining wall, a wall on top of that, some planning, that we are looking at this full project since it all interconnects.
But that's not what our charge is at this point in time.
Our charge is the trees and the hedge.
I know our charge is the trees and the heads, but I want to make sure that this follows along so we don't sit here in another 3 months because we could address something tonight.
Specifically, you want to do what?
Full inclusivity of the project. And that will mean elevation changes that happen in this area that takes out trees will affect all other elevation changes. They had better be taken care of so we're not sitting here in another 3 months having the same discussion because trees are coming down out on Mission Drive because all of a sudden there's been an elevation change and we have roots out of the ground or trunks buried 3 feet deep. That's what I'm trying to get here tonight.
I would like Josh to address that particular question now, because we weren't discussing that as a part of this whole agenda item.
It's not agendized.
Yeah,
Not
it's
agendized.
not something that was agendized regarding the remainder of the project. It's not something that was raised in the appeal. So the de novo review that the city council has is as respects the planning commission's decision. You are reviewing that de novo. I think I understand where Councilmember Deuce is trying to get to. The condition that Mr. Duncan provided, the second portion of it's probably an unlawful delegation to the community of an approval level. So to the extent that that's included in any motion, I would suggest against that. What I might suggest, however, is if the council is amenable to it, the first portion of condition 5 from Mr. Duncan was that there be a requirement that the BAR consider replacement screening and landscaping on Old Mission Drive that considers safety, aesthetics, sound effects, maintenance, responsibility, durability, drought tolerance, and graffiti, period, as part of its review. That was something that you could add to the conditions because that is one of the conditions that the Planning Commission included in its approval of the project.
Okay, well that, to me, this is part of it. If this is from, and I'm talking about from the footing on up, on that 300 feet also. And on up, that is whatever goes on up above. If the hedge goes away, something has to go in its place.
Well, that's BAR.
That's BAR.
BAR should have.
And it's BAR's, I'm not going to make the decision, I'm not going to say what it is, how it's done, what color it is, if it's mineral, plant, or whatever. But there has to be a plan, and this is a condition. There has to be a plan submitted to BAR. There has to be community input on that plan, hopefully in the development stage of it.
Dave, are you suggesting to eliminate the sentence starting with this replacement?
Yes, that's correct. And there's a provision in the existing conditions of approval, and it's on the top, it says page 8 of 17. It talks about, for the trees to be removed, the BAR shall require appropriate mitigation and approve a landscape plan, including tree replacement and screening vegetation. What I might suggest is you insert after that sentence a statement that the BAR shall consider replacement screening, et cetera. The first or the first sentence of Mr. Duncan's condition. Include that as the condition, the modified condition C6 of the Board of Architectural Review. And that covers everything that you have there because it's safety, aesthetics, sound effects, et cetera. Maintenance responsibility, everything would be at the BAR level. But again, I do not recommend the second sentence in there that it be approved by a majority of the neighbors speaking at the BAR meeting because that's an unlawful delegation of the responsibility of the council and the BAR.
Sure.
Lisa, did you get all that?
I think what I'm looking at, are these pre-meetings, which they will be gathering input. That to me would satisfy the community involvement. But certainly the BAR has to be able to make up their own mind, as we do.
Now, do you want to restate your motion?
Okay.
Ask Lisa to do it. She said
Yeah,
she'd
where
do it.
where you at on this one, Lisa?
You got it?
Not to put you on the spot.
I do have it on tape as well, so I can, I can get that. But currently, I have approved staff recommendation with a word change on a resolution, whereas item 3, to change the word denial to approval. And the remainder of the staff recommendation, deny the appeal and uphold the planning commission's approval with the suggestion that condition C6 of the Board of Architecture review, planning commission conditions of approval be amended to add language that the Board of Architecture review,
Shall consider.
I think it was point number 5 in the
Yeah,
app-
shall,
shall
appellants
consider
without the last
first
sentence.
sentence of
shall
that.
consider safety, aesthetics, sound effects, maintenance, responsibility, durability, drought tolerance, and graffiti.
Okay. That's the motion.
That's, yes, I believe that's the motion.
Did you second that earlier?
I'll be happy to.
Okay, so the motion is to deny the appeal with those conditions. Can I have a voice vote, please?
No, I think it should be roll call.
I'm sorry, I meant roll call. Thank you for correcting me, I meant
Sure.
that.
Councilmember Deuce?
Yes.
Jamison?
Yes.
Toussaint?
Yes.
Zimmerman?
Yes.
Mayor Richardson?
Yes, and that's with a 5-0. And I want to thank you all. This was a great exercise in democracy and all of that good stuff. And thank you for coming and giving us input and helping us make the decision. And I'm sorry, Lansing, that it didn't go your way 100%, but you're successful at accomplishing some of the things. And I think your appeal dollars were well spent. With that, we'll take a break. We'll be back at 5 minutes to 9.
Oh, my God.
Did it really?
so hard to work with.
No, actually, I consider Tim Govern
Yeah.
my good friend.
Okay.
And so I went to him personally and asked for this meeting.
Yeah.
So we had them all into his office. He brought his engineers in.
Oh, good.
And I sat next to the engineer, and he says to me, no, sorry.
Yeah, not without some serious, I mean, I remember what they were requiring when Aaron Peterson was trying to put in that project over there. You know, it's like 7 lots. They wanted just a reconfiguration of the entire southern half of the county there.
The argument is, the reason it wasn't going to happen is that bicyclists would conflict with cars turning in.
Yeah.
So that safety.
Yeah. And people would come in at high speed on that. There's no doubt about it.
And there would be guys doing U-turns too.
Yeah. No, I get it. It's
They're discussing it as a good thing.
yeah.
We're ready to reconvene. We're ready to reconvene. Okay, we're back to the agenda item. We're reconvening at item number 8. Read the item, please.
Item 8, water supply update.
Staff report? I'm sorry that the group left. This is an important public.
They all moved to the front row, too. Yes, yes, thank you very much for those who stayed. I definitely appreciate that. Well, I have been known to be boring, but I'll try not to be. And when I practiced this ahead of time, it took me 35 minutes. So if you could tell me how long you want me to make it, I can fit it to that.
I want it complete with good news.
Matt, you're preaching to the choir here. Most of us know most of it. So I, for one, would be happy with the condensed happy
okay.
version.
So just, if you have questions as I go through it, just stop me, interrupt me, and that's fine. Just fire away if you have any questions. Okay, so what we did was we recently got some questions from community members very concerned about what is the city of Solvang doing about addressing these continuing severe drought conditions. And don't be fooled, the rain we've gotten just recently, it's helping us, but we're far from being out of any kind of drought. So we're still in a severe drought, especially here in Santa Barbara County. In Northern California, maybe not as much, but right here, we definitely are. So we had these questions, these concerns by residents. What's the city doing? So we structured this presentation to answer that question. And we're doing quite a bit related to water. But everything that we're doing can be fit into one of these 5 categories. Long-range strategic planning and multi-year water supply projections, supplemental water purchases, drought restrictions. As you're aware, we're under stage 2 drought restrictions right now, capital projects, and an expanded water conservation program. So we'll talk more about each of these topics. So as far as our long-range strategic planning, in 2015 we completed the water supply management plan. We're planning to do a minor update of that later this year based on additional information we have received regarding Cachuma water rights releases and river well pumping by Alisal Ranch and ID1. So with that information, we're going to be able to update our water supply management plan. Also, we've shifted from a 1-year to a 2-year water supply projection. And the Water Ad Hoc Committee is intending to investigate water banking. So that's been a recommendation from staff, and that's our understanding that the Water Ad Hoc Committee, that's one of the topics they're going to look into.
Matt, can I just stop on water banking for a second? I see that we're looking at ID1 and Santa Maria.
Correct.
Are those our only options?
Well, no, we have, there's a lot of different options. We could participate through CCWA with the Irvine Ranch Water District Groundwater Bank. We could participate through CCWA with the Antelope Valley East Kern Water District Water Bank. There's also the Semi-Tropic Water District has a water bank we can participate in. But the most economically feasible and let me say, well, maybe not politically is not the right word. Logistically, the 2 that are the most would be the most beneficial, in staff's opinion at this point, is either Santa Maria or the San Ynez Valley with working with ID1.
Yeah. Some things some things that I wrote down if we enter into discussion with ID1 is meter charges in and out, transportation in and out through ID1's pipelines, pumping in and pumping out,
Good.
Storage shrinkage, and chromium-6.
Right, very good.
Especially if it's going into upland aquifers. I was going down this list, and these are all, along with storage charges. I didn't put storage charges in yet. This is something that we have to look at, the full package, because there are costs every step along the way. And logistically, yes, the ID1 is just a meter away. Santa Maria is on the pipeline coming down.
Right.
So, but we need to know full costs on all of these.
Sure, absolutely.
For sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and the one right next door is not necessarily the cheapest.
Right, not necessarily.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah.
We have to do a lot more discussion and
Yeah, I realize that, but I just kind of want to plant some seeds right now to the people that will be speaking with ID1.
Great, thank you. So, as I mentioned, we are doing now multi-year water supply projections, and we annually update our water supply spreadsheet and pie chart. I'm going to take a look at, we'll take a look at that in just a second. So, the bullet items, the 5 bullet items at the bottom here are items relative to 2017. So we have approximately 1,350 acre-feet of carryover from, that's state carryover water from 2016 going into 2017. We actually just a couple days ago got a report, the exact number is 1,395 acre-feet that we're carrying over, but we found that information out after we had prepared this presentation. But anyway, so you'll see other references to the 1,350 here. Of that 1,350 acre-feet of carryover that we have available going in from last year going into 2017, 350 acre-feet of that has to be returned to the Antelope Valley East Kern Water District. We did an exchange with them. We have to pay that back. We have to pay that 350 acre-foot debt back to them by the year 2025.
Now, is that with interest? The
No.
350 acre-feet is not with interest?
Not with interest. There will be some minor costs for us to deliver it back to them, to the conveyance, but other than that, there's like no interest or whatever yet. So. Also, our state water allocation at this point from Department of Water Resources for 2017 is 45%. That's equivalent to 675 acre-feet. And so that's all basically good news. Unfortunately, our river wells are on the verge of running dry. So as I mentioned earlier, the river wells are dependent upon some natural runoff from the nearby mountains and valley, but for the most part, the river wells are dependent upon water rights releases from Lake Cachuma. So if there's no water in Lake Cachuma, there's no water for water rights releases, and the natural runoff from just the area below Bradbury Dam is not enough to supply those wells for very long time. So we expect that in a few months, our 2 river wells, well 3 and 7A, will run dry. But in those first few months, we expect to be able to extract 93 acre-feet. But I wanted to point out that's down from over 400 acre-feet that we extracted from those wells in 2016. So that's a big difference. That's over 300 acre-feet that we're going to lose unless Lake Cachuma fills up. But even with all that, because we've had such great conservation and some other factors, we're projected to have 866 acre-feet of surplus or carryover into 2018. Now, the caveat on that is that that's dependent upon the fact, or dependent upon the San Luis Reservoir, where all this water is stored, to not spill. And we're going to talk about that in just a second. But so here's the supply. Here's our supply pie chart. So basically, all the colored wedges, except for the red, indicate our supply for 2017. The red is the surplus, and this is based on a projected water demand of 1,250 acre feet for 2017. So I mentioned the San Luis Reservoir and the spill potential. So just about 7 weeks ago, at the end of November, the Department of Water Resources assessed the potential of the San Luis Reservoir spilling as very low potential, just 7 weeks ago. And unfortunately, just, I think it was Thursday last week, we were notified that that has dramatically changed because of the recent forecasts of heavy rain in the southern Sierra Nevada mountains. So what happens is the San Luis Reservoir is kind of in the coastal mountains directly across from the southern Sierra Nevada mountains. And when you get heavy rain in the southern Sierra Nevada mountains, which we have not had for the last 5 years during this drought, it's been very low rainfall there. But if you get heavy rainfall and heavy runoff into the San Joaquin River watershed, well, Department of Water Resources has pumping plants to pull that water out and pump it into the San Luis Reservoir. And that is all south of the Bay Delta, so they don't have to face all of the environmental restrictions that they do from the Oroville Reservoir, which is their northern California reservoir, trying to pump that water through the Bay Delta and to protect the steel or the salmon and all the different other critters. But so right now there's forecasts for heavy rain in the southern Sierra Nevada mountains, which means heavy runoff to the San Joaquin River, which means DWR will increase their pumping and of water into San Luis Reservoir, and the new water pushes out the carryover water and spills the carryover water. So we lose all that. So let me expand on that, though.
I don't understand that precept, you know. If you-
Yeah, it's troubling. I don't like it.
I understand that, but I don't understand why, if we had water there and more water came in that overspilled, we'd still have our water allocated in there. Who else gets that water that's spilled?
The fish.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
it's sort of
can't explain the logic.
the price of you being able to store it in there means you're the first to go. The new water gets to come in. That's sort of, I guess, the simplest.
Well, is that new water all allocated? Is that what it is?
Well, that's a good question. So what'll happen is, if there is heavy rainfall and heavy runoff and heavy pumping from the San Joaquin River into the San Luis Reservoir, then it's highly likely the state water allocation will be increased. So we'll get some more out of it, but that's the rules. We you know.
Where else does the water from that reservoir go if it doesn't go down the central pipe or the pipeline along the coast? Is there any other outlets for it?
Yeah, there's a spillway that it basically ends up going out to the ocean.
No,
after a long-
I mean pumped out down the pipeline. Is that the only exit out of that reservoir besides spill? Is the pipe that comes down the coastal line?
Yeah, so you have, I'm not sure I totally understand the question, but.
Well, you got a reservoir here that's sitting there,
Mhm.
and there's a pipe coming out of it that comes to us. No?
Yeah, it's basically a branch. So you have the
Yeah,
trunk.
right.
And then you have the trunk, which is the state water aqueduct, California aqueduct, and then you have a branch off of that that goes to the San Luis Reservoir.
Right.
And so,
From the San Luis Reservoir, where does it go?
well, it goes in and out from that branch.
Can go back to that branch and down the.
Yeah, yeah.
That reservoir is just sitting there. We don't have a direct pipeline out of there. Our turnout is much further down.
Right.
Coming off the aqueduct.
Yeah, so they have to
the
take
coastal correct.
Right, that's correct. So
The coastal turnout's not at the reservoir.
No, no.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
The reservoir is
Yeah,
just a big
it's-
pond.
Yeah.
Got it, I understand.
Yeah,
Got
it's
it.
offline storage, yeah.
Thank you.
So, so I just wanted to remind you that the reason why we have all this carryover is because of, in large part, because of the outstanding conservation of our residents and businesses. In 2013, our demand was 1,557 acre feet. And in 2015 and 16, our demand was close to 1,100. So that's over 450 difference, or approximately 450 acre feet difference. So 2 years of that, that's 900 acre feet right there. So it's been great. Our customers, our residents and businesses have done really great. And obviously, just 7 weeks ago, DWR thought the chance of this happening would be really low. And now it's a 50-50 chance that it could happen. But there's many variables. So the temperature of the storm, if you get a really cold storm in the southern Sierra Nevadas, you're going to get more snow and less rain. And so it'll be stored up there, less runoff, and less chance of it spilling. And I heard I guess it was this morning or yesterday, that they think it is going to get a little bit colder there with the next storm. Also, the river turbidity, it doesn't really make sense, but when you got a lot of runoff and heavy flows, kind of like storm flows coming down, it creates a lot of turbidity. Well, believe it or not, the delta smelt, they like the murky water. So they move towards the murky water, and if that happens, then DWR cannot pump as much. They have to cut back or curtail their pumping so that they don't take, harm the delta smelt. So that's a factor. Also, a lot of large agencies, such as, for example, Antelope Valley East Kern Water District, they got the new report from DWR that there's a higher potential of losing their carryover water. And so they're pulling all that water out as fast as they can right now as we speak, pumping 24/7 to try to inject that into their groundwater bank. So that's going to lower the level and make more room for this other pumping. Yeah, and then in addition to that, the San Luis Reservoir, the storage in there is shared by the state, or DWR, and the federal California Central Valley Water Project. And so right now, the federal share, they have storage space available. So the state, or DWR, is going to try to talk to them and say, hey, can we temporarily borrow or encroach on your available storage so that we don't lose, as much. Yeah, so it's complicated. It's hard to predict, but there's definitely, at this point, they're telling us there's a 50-50 chance that the reservoir could fill and spill. And that fill and spill would occur over a 2 to 4 week period. And so that brings up the next two bullets.
Matt, just out of curiosity, that federal project, is that the Friant project, or is that's tied up to Isabella?
I think
isn't it?
they have facilities that are part of it, but yeah, I'm not as familiar with the federal water project as I am with the state water project, so I don't know the answer to that. I'm sorry.
You're a Valley girl. Holly, what say you on the Friant?
I will get back with you on that.
Okay.
I'm the person that knows that answer.
Okay, thanks.
So one option open to us through CCWA is to participate in a groundwater banking program with the Irvine Ranch Water District. So Irvine Ranch Water District is down there in the middle of Orange County, but they own a bunch of land in the Central Valley and have a groundwater banking program there. And so there's no upfront costs, but it's a 2-for-1 exchange. So if we give them 1,000 acre feet, we can only get 500 back. And there are minor recovery costs, again, to pull the water back out of the groundwater bank and convey it back to the state water system. So that's really the only possibility for us at this point that CCWA has identified.
Those minor costs, were they similar to the Antelope Valley minor costs in and out that you were telling me about, the 250 or whatever it was?
Yeah, it's between $50 and $100 per acre foot.
Okay, so it's a lot less than the Antelope Valley.
Right, yeah. The Antelope Valley one was much more. It was like, I think it was it would end up being $475
yeah,
per acre foot.
going both ways.
Yeah, right, for both
Yeah.
ways, yeah.
Is there any reason that we can't take the spill and bank it in ID1 or in Lake Cachuma?
Yeah, well, we cannot bank it in Lake Cachuma, basically because the coastal branch of the state water project that comes right by here, that takes the state water to Lake Cachuma, it only has a limited capacity, and right now they're pumping full blast all the South Coast agencies' water. I mean, in fact, they can't even pump fast enough to fill Lake Kachuma with their state water. So it's basically this big pool with the kind of a skinnier straw that connects to Lake Kachuma.
And for that reason, we can't send it over to ID1.
Right, that's correct, yeah. So we have, our only option at this point, if it appears that the reservoir will spill and we'll lose this carryover water, would be to bank it with Irvine Ranch Water District. So CCWA is actively working on this right now. They know it's a really critical issue there's several Santa Barbara County CCWA member agencies that have lots of water, a lot more than us, stored in San Luis Reservoir.
So why don't we just take the water and use it? Why are we going to give up half?
Well, yeah, if we
put it in the pipe and we put it through our showers.
Well, this is the water we're talking about is more than a full year's worth of water.
Perfect. We can save our groundwater.
But we have
4 weeks.
From today, we have 2 to 4 weeks to use it all. We couldn't. You follow what I'm saying? Because it's all sitting there in the reservoir, and with this forecast heavy rainfall in the southern Sierra Nevada mountains, they're projecting the amount of rainfall that could potentially happen within this short amount of time will be, because you're talking a huge, 1/6 of the whole state of California, the southern.
Based on your projection that we're going to lose 50% of it if we send it over to Irvine, why can't we use some of that locally, and then at the end of this 4-week, let it flush into them, the balance? If we have, 450 acre feet or something?
Oh, well, certainly we can do that for the next 2 to 4 weeks.
Yeah, just use it.
And maybe
Save
for the
ground.
future,
Much as possible.
in the future, let's just take it and use it rather than do this banking system. Obviously, it's not working. I mean, if we're coming down to the line here, we got 2 weeks to use 1,000 acre feet. We shouldn't even be in that situation, really.
Yeah, well, unfortunately with water supply planning, there's so many variables and there's so many things we can't predict. We're going into year 6 of severe drought in Santa Barbara County. The drought in Australia that recently ended lasted for 11 years. And so we're always trying to have carryover water for future years. Like, for example, now our river wells are going to run dry. So we don't have very many options. So this is one of them, is to bank up our carryover water in San Luis Reservoir so that we have it. So imagine if Lake Kachuma doesn't fill at all this year, and it doesn't fill for the next 4 years. That's over 400 acre feet every year that we used to get from our river wells. That's going to be gone, and
But I think we need to factor in evaporation rate, and then in these worst case scenarios where if it does spill over and we're banking it in some Irvine water bank in the valley and losing 50%, now we're looking at it just doesn't make sense. I mean,
I'm not sure
if we should have just been taking the water the whole time, right?
Well,
if we're going to lose half of it or evaporation rate and.
Well, okay, well, first of all, we're under state.
If it's there, we should use it.
We're under a state requirement to conserve water, cut back 25% or, reduce our landscape irrigation back down to 2 days a week. So we're under all these regulations to conserve water, and we're trying to plan for multiple years instead of just 1 year. So, if our demand for the last 2 years is 1,100 acre feet per year, part of our strategy has been to bank this water in this reservoir. It's very rarely is in this situation where it spills. So it's just kind of a perfect storm where and it still may not spill. We may not lose any of it, but there's a 50-50 chance now. So that's one of the reasons why we want to pursue the banking, other banking options.
Okay, so that's not our only option, because I guess that's what I'm going off of. You said at this point, our only option is to bank it in the Irvine.
The only option for banking.
That's for the next 2 to 4 weeks. Yeah, our only option in the next 2 to 4 weeks to try to save, if it reached the point where the San Luis Reservoir was gonna start spilling, that would happen in the next 2 to 4 weeks with this big forecast storm. So in this next 2 to 4 weeks, the only way we can bank or save some of that, if the San Luis Reservoir is going to spill, would be to bank it with Irvine Ranch Water District.
And then if it spills, how much do we lose?
Well, most likely all of it, not necessarily, but it depends on how much new
Depends
water
on the spill
into it.
rate. Depends on how much spills.
Right, how much, it depends on
And
how much they're pumping into it.
how much carryover water is in San Luis right now. And if the spill is equal to or greater, everything is lost. If the spill rate is less, then that is the percentage that we lose.
Right, it's prorated based on everybody
that
that
all
has.
participants who are in
believe
there
me,
lose.
Right, and there's dozens of agencies that have carryover water in
Just
San
kind
Luis
of to go back to Neil's question, even if we had just shut off all the wells and only used state water, it'd only be another 300 a year that we would have drawn from it. So we couldn't have used all of that, even if we just, as you said, just use it. We're only getting about 300 acre feet from our upland wells. That'd be the only replacement of that. So just to, hopefully that helps.
So at any rate, staff recommends that tonight, one of the actions the city council does is to authorize the city manager to take action and sign any agreements to bank this water in the Irvine Ranch Water District groundwater bank if it appears in the next 2 to 4 weeks that the San Luis Reservoir is going to spill. Because if it does, then basically we're potentially going to lose all of it. So this gives us an option to at least save, approximately half of it.
Was that 300 acre feet a year, 300 acre feet out of the banking water? It replaces the wells we have.
I'm sorry?
The wells that we have are that's 300 acre feet a year that we get out of those wells?
I was just looking at Matt's,
The upland wells.
the pie chart. Yeah, the
Yeah.
upland wells, yeah. Obviously, the river wells, if we
upland
don't
and
pull in
river.
those, it's going by too. So that water would just be going by.
There
and
ought to
we'd
be,
losing it.
mathematically, there ought to be a tipping point where it's beneficial for us to use that banked water ourselves and then let the rest of it go to the bank. If you understand, to use the water in the reservoir. There ought to be a point where it's more economic for us to use that because 50% of 1,000 acre feet versus 50% of 800 acre feet, for example. We'd use that 200 ourselves and the other 800 goes into the banking and then we get back 400. I think we'd gain an extra 100 acre feet that way.
I'm sorry, didn't totally follow you, but I apologize for that.
Well,
one.
I hope I made that clear.
No, I get you, Jim. You just want to turn on the state spigot 100% right now.
Right.
We rely on it just to reduce what we have up at San Luis. And then as it gets closer, if the storms continue and they're warm, at some point in time, we're going to have to pull a trigger, but maybe we've gotten 100 acre feet out of there, so
We'll do that. Tomorrow morning, I'll direct the water staff to shut
Investigate
down
that.
our wells, fire up the state water. It takes a couple days to make it happen, but
Yeah.
we'll do that.
Is there, okay.
Just found this out Thursday. just so
There
you know.
is,
I
there is
haven't known this for weeks
capacity,
already.
there is capacity for full delivery coming in here, correct?
Correct,
It's
absolutely.
just
Yeah,
further
yes,
on up.
Yes, that is correct. That is
Okay.
correct. We
And
could run 100% state water
Irvine is the only game in town
At this point, that is
at this
correct.
point?
Under this short term that
Under-
we're talking about.
Under a short term. Okay, so this would only be a short-term storage or a short-term, hurry up and get it out and get it in?
It's the only option that can be developed and implemented within the next 2 to 4 weeks.
Okay.
For this
Okay.
water that we're talking about.
And
Okay,
we'll-
we've
But
looked
long
at,
term, that's why we want to do water banking.
Yeah.
Right now, really, if you think of it, the only bank that we have right now is the San Luis Reservoir.
Mhm.
But as you can see, it's
It's
not
a-
perfect.
It's not a savings bank.
It rarely does spill, but occasionally we get in these situations where we can lose some. And the Water Supply Management Plan recommends that, when in years where we have higher state water allocation, that we bank that water either in San Luis Reservoir or in a groundwater bank like Santa Maria or ID1 here in the San Ynez Valley or Semi-Tropic or wherever, so that we can't lose it. But all these banks
Cost us.
cost
money.
a lot of money, these other banks, where the San Luis Reservoir, it's basically a free bank.
Yeah.
So, you know, you gotta balance costs and risk and everything. It's always balancing costs and risk, so.
Well, I think that's where you start allocating, you know, yeah, some's up there, but then, you know, you have your hedge
Right, the more,
somewhere else.
yeah, if you can put a little bit in a few different places,
Yeah.
then you're not at as much risk.
And we'll continue with our conservation efforts. This doesn't mean because we get this banked water, we get free rain.
Right,
We'll
that's
keep the
absolutely
drought-
right.
The
We're gonna
drought
go- we're gonna-
regulations in
we're gonna-
place and the
we're gonna-
conservation efforts, yes.
So,
What's the evaporation rate that San Luis charges us?
we have there's none.
None?
Yeah, so it's really good. I mean, basically, what they've done is they've accounted for all that in their operations and management of it in such a way that when you put the water in there, you're not gonna lose one drop, basically. If you put 100 in and they have some evaporation, they've already accounted for that.
But we run the risk of losing it all in a spill. Okay.
It's a free bank, but you take the risk that you lose it in the spill.
Yeah. So we recommend the city council authorize the city manager to take that action and sign any agreements. Again, because this could actually happen within 2 weeks before we are able to come back again to city council, so.
Yeah, I don't wanna lose it.
Okay, so one of the other things we've been doing is all these supplemental water purchases. So this is just a summary of that. Again, in 2015, we did an exchange for 350 acre-feet, and currently we're working on reacquiring 300 acre-feet of suspended Table A state water. And that was,
Matt, on that, is that inside these numbers, that 300 acre-feet that we acquired? That's not reflecting in the 675, right? For the state water?
correct, that's not reflected in there.
So
Yeah,
when does
'cause
that come into
this,
play?
The Board of Supervisors just directed their staff to put together the agreement documents between the county and CCWA. That's the first step, and then then CCWA can then go to DWR and finalize the agreement with them. And then the first year after that, we'll start getting this. Yeah, so it'll probably be 2019 will be probably the first year, but maybe 2018 if we're lucky. As you're aware, we're under stage 2 drought restrictions. I gave a little bit of history there. Again, we were the first agency within Santa Barbara County to implement stage 1 drought restrictions. And we've had the stage 2 in place since July of 2014. And so here I bring up again about Lake Achuma. It's at a historic low level. I want to just show you this slide here. So you can see that dip right there. That was in 1991, the big drought of 1989, 90, 91, when the Miracle March, filled Lake Achuma back up and all. So if you look to the far right of that graph, that's where we are now. So we're way below the 25,000 in storage in Lake Achuma that was in 1991. So Lake Achuma, again, it's at historic low levels. As I mentioned, our Solvang River wells are going to run dry within 2 to 3 months. And so what staff is suggesting is that the city council we think it's prudent to at least seriously consider a temporary moratorium on new water service. As you probably are aware, ID1, they've had a moratorium in place for about a year and a half. And so we're suggesting if this was implemented, it could be for a 12 to 18-month duration. There's 2 possible triggers that you could use to lift the moratorium if it is enacted, and that would be when Lake Achuma got to 25% full, because once it got to about 25% full, then they'd again have water to release for water rights down the river, and so our river wells would be able to again begin pumping. Or wait till we put well 22 in service. So we're working on the engineering right now for well 22. And we expect that that well will be in service in spring of 2018, ready for summer of 2018. And we would recommend that if a moratorium is implemented, that existing developments be exempt. So anybody that's in the works right now or gotten planning approvals or Cannon water Cannon will serve letters, they'd be exempt. They'd go forward, but anybody new coming in would be the
Those
moratorium would
conditional
apply.
moratorium lists would be not automatically triggered.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Those moratorium reliefs, lifting the moratorium would not be automatically triggered at 25% or well 22. It would be, we would consider that as a council.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, however you want.
Well,
You're the-
well
you're the
22
bosses.
could come into service
However
and
you
we'd
wanna do it.
still be in
It's
a
just-
drought and all that, you know. so.
Right. Yeah, it wouldn't be automatic. These are just possible options.
You know, as much as I dislike moratoriums, I just really have a problem with them. What scares me the most out of this is losing carryover water. And it's one of these, it's a blessing to get rain, but it sure as heck is not a blessing to get rain, especially where you're supposed to be getting snow. And then not to really get the rain, because we're not getting the rain here that we need to fill Kachuma. And I'm seeing these bands of red, you know, crossing San Luis, slamming right into the southern Sierras. That's what is happening. We're getting missed.
Right.
So yeah, we could be sitting here with losing half our carryover that we've worked really hard on saving, and not have a damn thing come down the river at us. That could happen really easy.
Right. That is correct. That is absolutely correct. So.
Let's wait till public comment.
Okay. So also what we're doing lots of capital projects. We've just finished, of course, the new HCA South well. That's in service, helping us. We're working on the engineering for upgrading well 22 and activating that, putting that well in service. And we're working on our River Wells project. I discussed the State Water Resources permit and the amendments that we're trying to pursue on that. We have to get the permit amended before we can really finish the engineering work on that project. So that's going to be a few years for that to come to fruition. But in addition to that, somebody, I think Councilwoman Jameson mentioned stormwater capture or stormwater storage or something. I forget exactly how you said it, but we actually are working on 2 stormwater capture projects right now. We are participating with the County of Santa Barbara in developing a stormwater resources plan. And that's looking at all the locations in the county where we have potential to capture stormwater and recharge the groundwater basin through different projects. And we're also, we have a request for proposal out right now. The proposal is due this Friday to do our 2nd Street drainage improvement projects. That's in conjunction with the upgrades to the parking lot 2 just up the street here. And the plan is to implement either an infiltration basin under the parking lot or a couple dry wells. Again, to first the water would be filtered, siphoned off of the storm drain system during a rainstorm, filtered, and then put into these dry wells or the infiltration basin to help recharge our groundwater basin. So that project, it's a small project. It's it's not going to solve all of our problems, but it's just one little thing that we can do. We got grant funding to cover about 1/3 of the cost of that project. And so those are the two projects we're working on right now.
Would that work in conjunction with the park improvement plans that we have with the landscaping and that kind of thing? You're going to dig through that area to run the sewer pipes?
No, this is in parking lot 2.
Yeah, well, like parking lot 2 is right next to Solvang Park.
But it's just in the parking lot.
just in the
It's
park.
not in the proper.
Yeah, that project would not go into the
That's
park
good.
at all.
Okay.
So these are just some photos of, the top photo is well 22 in its current condition, that's going to be upgraded. The middle photos are new HCA South well, and the bottom photo is them taking, our engineering sub-consultant taking soil samples, soil borings along the San Ynez River as part of our new river wells project. So the last thing is water conservation programs. We've really ramped up and expanded our water conservation programs. Our low-flow toilet rebate program is ongoing. We've issued 30 rebates. Some of those rebates were for 2 toilets each. And our rain barrel rebate program, we've issued 23 rebates for that last year. We've increased our public education and outreach. In 2015-16, we had water conservation of over 30%. And our landscape rebate program, it was a 2-year program, which ended about 6 months ago, 7 months ago. We issued 42 rebates, and we had the highest per capita conservation under that program in Santa Barbara County. So we just really nailed it on that one. We did a great job. So here's just a summary. If you look on the far right-hand column, our average of those 42 rebates that we issued, our average conservation was number 2 of all the cities at 559 HCF per person or per rebate. That was the average. And we've, just through that program alone, it was so successful, we've conserved enough water to, the amount of water we conserved could supply the city per year, could supply the city for the whole month of January, the entire city for the whole month of January, with 42 rebates. We could supply the city with water for the entire month of January. So we're going to be recommending renewing that program next fiscal year. So that concludes my presentation. Sorry, it took a long time. So again, the 2 things we're asking is that you authorize the city manager to take action in executing the agreements to participate in the Irvine Ranch Water District groundwater banking program if it appears San Luis Reservoir is imminently going to spill. And we also need direction regarding a possible moratorium on new water service.
I got a question, Matt.
Yes.
I forget what the reason was, but why can't we bank the water with ID1, the full amount? And how can we do it with Irvine but not ID1?
Well, ID1 doesn't have the facilities basically to make it happen that quickly. So the Irvine Ranch Water District, they have, I think it's about 300 acres of land that's all been specially developed for these giant basins for the water to infiltrate down in. And they have special wells surrounding those basins to extract the groundwater after it's soaked down into the ground. So they physically have the facilities to handle that. ID1, to bank water with them, we have the plumbing in place with the state pipeline. Basically, it would be kind of an in-lieu banking, where when we have extra state water, they could take some of our state water, it would just flow down the pipeline to them, and they'd get the high-quality state water, and they'd leave their groundwater in the ground. And then when we need it, they pump it out, and they're required to treat for chromium-6. That's the big issue, and they're spending millions of dollars to implement a big treatment facility. But then they could pull it out and send it through their distribution system to our 2 interconnects and pay us back. So it'd be kind of like yeah.
So I bring that up because of the Soil Groundwater Sustainability Act and whatnot, and we really got to get in place here, avoid, supplying San Joaquin with water and allowing them to, feed off of us, because we're in deficit here in our basin, and we're going to find ourselves in a real bad situation. And if we're just giving away water like that, even if we had to give it to ID1, at least it's in the same basin that we share with them.
Right. Staff totally agrees.
So how are we got to move forward on that, or, recharging and the whole nine?
It is my understanding, though, that banking is viewed very differently than recharging aquifers. That's my understanding on banking versus recharging.
Well, there's a lot of terms like banking and recharge and in lieu banking that sometimes the definitions kind of overlap a little bit or sort of fuzzy. But with respect to ID1, it would be, as I described, kind of like an in lieu, where they use our state water when we have an abundance of it and leave their wells idle or, pump less out of the groundwater basin, and then when we need it, they pump it out for us.
Yeah,
Take us back.
they have no mechanism to inject water back into the ground, which is sort of the banking concept. That's why it's an in lieu.
Are there any storage options that could be explored with Buellton?
Possibly.
Can you
We
elaborate
could-
on any possible options there? Or?
Well, the thing with Buellton is they sit on a really great groundwater portion of the groundwater basin, which unfortunately we don't enjoy that. But so for them, we could do the same thing where they could take our state water and pump less from their wells, and then when we need it, they could pump their wells and give us some of their state water. So we could do the exact same thing. It's just
would it be cheaper?
we'd have to look into that further.
It's the same problem with tank pipe capacity that you were talking about for ID1.
Yeah. The difference is ID1 has the plumbing to send us their groundwater. Buellton right now doesn't have that plumbing. The only thing they could do is pay us back in state water, and they don't have very much state water. So it could be done. There'd be more limitations to it than if we did it with ID1. But it could be done, but the costs and all those, that has to be evaluated further.
I think, as Matt said, we're going to do an update to our water management supply plan later this year. And I think that section probably needs to do the banking kind of concept, and trading needs some more work.
Well, this was recommended in the water supply management plan that these banking options be pursued.
With Buellton?
Well, they recommended actually Santa Maria and ID1 as the most logical ones.
There was a idea floating around a while back about a pipeline from Buellton to Solvang. Is that still is that a pipe dream, so to speak?
No, that could be done without too much cost. Caltrans right away goes right down there.
Yeah.
You could get an encroachment permit.
Has anybody done any serious investigating in that?
No, but I've had that in the back of my head for a while. But
I think one of the differences is Buellton hasn't come to us and said, "Hey, we want to work with you on it," where Santa Maria is always willing to.
Well, yeah, Santa Maria.
Their water is their thing. So yeah, I mean, we could pursue it with Buellton, but I don't know. I mean, they're a much smaller agency and smaller user, so it's.
Their abundant water supply might be a good backup source for us. That's the question in my mind. I have one question. You mentioned about a special, an emergency contract for the city manager to sign.
Right.
You didn't give us any kind of detail on what that might be. It's kind of like giving them a blank check right now.
Yeah, you're right.
Oh, that relieves me.
I'm at a loss. I'm at a loss to provide you with any better recommendation at this point. We just literally found out on Thursday that the possibility of a spill was increased from very remote to 50%, and I'm just scrambling. That's CCWA had looked into or was looking into a banking with Antelope Valley East Kern, but they don't Antelope Valley, they can't take our water because they're taking their own water out of San Luis Reservoir and putting it in their bank. So
Yeah,
it's
just
not
to
an
give you
option.
more comfort, I think what we would say is we'll bring it back to you at an emergency meeting. We'll just call an emergency meeting if we need to do that.
And then you said you'd go ahead with shutting off the wells and pumping straight state water into the water
Yeah, we can
system?
do that, no
Okay,
problem,
okay,
yeah.
thank you.
We'll do that right away.
Is there any other questions of this report? Seeing none, we'll take it to the public and Gay, you're first.
I actually did just want Matt to repeat something, but I found the answer in here.
Oh.
What I want to do is encourage you to institute a moratorium on new water service, because in looking at this water management plan update or document that Matt put together here, well 22 isn't going to be in service at least till the end of the year, is what I read, and it isn't going to make up for the loss of the over 400 acre feet that we get from the river wells. So even if that comes into service, we might get 300 acre feet out of it. But we're not going to get that for a while. So when those wells run dry in the spring, I think we need to stop providing new service. So that's what I wanted to encourage. And then I had a couple of other questions. One is, if this water that's going to spill and be lost could have been delivered and we had a reservoir to put it in, we could have saved some of it.
Yeah.
And I think we should look at, in our next budget cycle, at getting some more capacity for water storage. I know, Joni, you were talking about that too, and I've heard that Joan Hartman is looking into that as well, but that's not going to help Solvang in the near term. And then as far as water banking in places like Santa Maria and even in ID1, if that's water that we're going to put in there and then take out and use, I really worry about contamination. We don't have water treatment, I don't think, that can deal with pesticide and nitrate pollution that we would get from Santa Maria, and then there's chromium-6 in the upland wells in ID1.
The water flow out of the Irvine bank comes back up the aqueduct into lake, into the storage, I can't remember the name of it now, storage
San Luis
lake,
Reservoir.
and then it comes pumping back to us. It goes through a treatment plant, leaving that San
Yeah,
Luis
well,
Reservoir.
as long as it goes back there, that's great, but if it goes to Santa Maria, is that going to go back to San Luis Reservoir also?
No, it
Okay.
doesn't.
Well, yeah, okay. Well, anyway, I think that's all I had to say right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Gay.
Yeah, just to clarify, I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about water storage. So a 1 million gallon reservoir, we don't have one of those. A
Right.
1 million gallon reservoir, that's 3 acre feet.
That's right.
So you'd need a whole bunch of those to. So that's why the groundwater bank, that's huge. That's enormous. You got acres and acres, hundreds of acres of land, 1 foot deep. Now you've got
Several hundred thousand.
you got several
100,000
hundred
acre
or
feet.
1,000 acre feet. And of course San Luis Reservoir, it's monstrous. It's like Lake Achuma. It's giant.
Bigger.
So the smaller reservoirs in our system are for day-to-day operations, for peak hour demands, and for firefighting storage, and for that type of thing.
Buffering,
Yeah. But so there's kind of two different realms. Yeah.
One of the things too is, as far as moving water around, a lot of times we don't actually get our water back, the molecules. It's all water credits. They're not going to all of a sudden have the aqueduct flow north for a couple hours to get ours back up to San Luis. It's going to be water credits coming down that somebody else will be taking the molecules that we actually stored in lieu of, and it hits the turnout and comes over to see us. That's really how this whole process works.
Is there any other public comment? Come on ahead.
Gary Blake again. First, you guys did a great job on the prior issue that we discussed, so thank you.
Thank you.
That was a sticky situation, I believe. I can't remember when I've talked to a city council twice in one night on two different issues, but.
Come back often.
But water is important. Just, I actually have been on the boards of 2 irrigation districts and chaired one, so I really have deep appreciation and understanding of that situation here. We recently acquired this project, the Starny project on Old Mission, and have entered into a development agreement with the city and posted a bond for our water, and we hope to be putting that in place later this year. So I would urge you to go along with staff's recommendation to provide service for approved developments.
Did you get a can?
That makes a lot of sense.
Did you get a can and serve letter already?
We do, but of course,
Okay.
those are good for 6 months, I think, right? And we'll probably go ahead and renew that, just to be safe, but I think what Matt and his staff have recommended makes a lot of sense. Moratorium is a very tough issue to deal with. It does make sense because we can't just go on a wing and a prayer that we get the water that we need. So I do understand that. On the other side, I know the Skip Mesa project and ours, have both made significant investments and have actually entered into legal agreements with the city where we have to perform. So 2 sides to that. So if you'll please consider that, we would appreciate it.
Thank you, Gary. Is there any other public comment? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the council for discussion and decision. Who'd like to start? Hands.
Bank it. Let us know. Just don't lose it. And like I say, I hate to say moratorium, but until I see some improvement in our watershed up behind up in the end of the valley, I don't want to. We're losing too much in the river. If we lose half our carryover, we're in deep trouble. So I think we need to.
Any other comments?
In regards to the moratorium, is that going to affect us in any way on proving up our wells in the river? Because we have to show the usage, right?
Yeah, the moratorium would likely be lifted by the city council before those wells would even be ready to go into service.
Okay.
Is there any projection of potential water users that don't have can and will serve letters yet?
You've had a couple of potential users in the industrial area, right?
Right. On the
At
west end.
The old castle entry into
Castle,
town. We've
yeah.
had a couple of higher user developers pose projects, but not request.
Suggested microbrewery and a suggested winery, small boutique winery in that industrial area.
How quickly would the moratorium go into effect, such as just someone already having a can and will serve and someone walking in the door tomorrow?
Well, you can date it as effective as tonight, I guess.
It'd have to come back for action, but you could certainly set, retroactivity is a little bit of a sticky wicket on that situation because you are cutting people off. But if you have direction to staff to bring back something with a date specific, no matter what date you pick, there's going to be people who are going to be lined up at the door trying to get in under that deadline. Going retroactive, people might assert that they were not entitled to due process in that they didn't have an opportunity and action was taken by the council on an item that wasn't fully fleshed out and so on. So there are 2 ways that can cut.
I have a comment.
Yes.
I went through this moratorium situation in ID1 with a client of mine. There's no way in whatever that I would ever say now, yes, we're going to do a moratorium. This room would be filled if people knew that that's what we were considering. So I would suggest we put it on the next agenda for discussion and make sure that it's readily known that that's what we are considering at this time.
Mike, can you make a note of that in your article? That's a good suggestion, is that we give another public notice that we're going to consider a moratorium on water. That'd be terrific. What do you think?
At least.
Just, do you want to do that at the next meeting? You're going to have your preliminary rate study. So
Maybe the next
You
meeting
definitely will
after that.
fill the building if you add moratorium with that.
You want to hold it off until February then?
Yeah, I would probably recommend that you deal with the rate, initial rate increases and then.
And then talk about the moratorium. Okay. That's agreed. So the motion that we want to construct is going to receive the report and consider giving the city manager authority to sign a contract for banking water.
You know, I don't think you need to give me that. We'll bring it back to you. I would understand your hesitancy to give me the blank check. I don't really want the blank check. I've already been to Mexico. But yeah.
Yeah, you gotta carry water to
we'll bring it
Mexico,
back at an emergency meeting if we need that.
Okay, so the upshot of this discussion was we're going to take state water as opposed to our local waters, and we're going to receive this report. We're going to delay the moratorium question until an April meeting, until a February meeting. Okay, so then can I have, since it's all we're going, well, I guess there's a motion involved in that then.
Yeah, that's the motion.
Okay, that's the motion. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
Can I have a voice vote, roll call vote, please?
Mayor Richardson?
Yes.
Councilmember Toussaint?
Yes.
Deuce?
Yes.
Jameson?
Yes.
Zimmerman?
Yes.
And that's passed with a 5-0. The next item on the agenda are committee meetings, committee reports. Is there any? I don't have one for SBCAG or APCD. Does anybody else have one? No? Is the water, can I ask this question about the Water Ad Hoc Committee? Any plans they have for meeting with,
Yeah, really, we're waiting for the petition issue to sort of, with this, what Matt talked about, your operations plan. Once we've got that operation plan completed, we're almost done with it. We're going to bring that to ID1 and LSL's representatives. I think it'd probably be premature to have the water committee meet until the operation plan is more secure.
and that's regarding CCWA also with that,
No, that's just the river permit.
okay, well,
Yeah.
do we want to consider going ahead with the CCWA petition to get on the board?
If I recall, I'd have to actually go back and look at, you've had that item before you a few times. I think the last direction was we'd want to look at it as maybe a regional organization. Wasn't that the last direction, is to meet with ID1 about potentially a regional, which could include us going into them and those
With
types of
the,
things, yeah.
with the,
I think that was the last direction.
Okay.
We've not really formulated that because I think we really need to deal with it. If you recall, the petition issue got a little heated, if you will, back and forth in the early parts of it, so we're trying to finish that up.
Okay.
So.
Is there any other comments? With that, we're adjourned. Thank you all.